Chapter 295. In order to clear the misunderstanding, Li Mu had to know what the misunderstanding was. He had done nothing wrong, but he was treated like this. Anyone would be angry. Zhang Chun tried his best to persuade him. The consequences of this are very serious. Think about it. You've offended so many people in Fairy's capital. Once you lose His Majesty's protection, many people won't be able to stop themselves from attacking you. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door of the Li residence. Li Mu walked to the door and saw two constables standing outside. One of the constables looked at Li Mu and said nervously, "Lord Li, there's a case that involves you. Please cooperate with us and follow us to the Ministry of Justice." Zhang Chun was shocked. He asked, "Someone's making a move so soon?" The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor had just spread, and the Ministry of Justice had already made a move. It seemed that some people hated him to the point where they couldn't tolerate it for even a moment longer. To prevent Xiao Bai from worrying, Li Mu told her to wait for him at home and not go out no matter what happened. Then he gave the conch to Xiao Bai. If anything happened at home, she could contact the Empress instantly. After doing all this, he walked to the door again and said to the two constables, "Let's go." On the way to the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu asked the constable, "What case am I involved in?" The constable shook his head. "It's not convenient for me to reveal this. You'll know when you reach the Ministry of Justice." When he spoke to Li Mu, he was still cautious. The Emperor's heart was unpredictable. Who knew if Li Mu had really fallen out of favor? If he was favored again in a few days, wouldn't the people who offended him be in big trouble? "Constable Li, where are we going?" This is the direction to the Ministry of Justice." "Is Constable Li going to the Ministry of Justice to cause trouble again?" Quick, quick, quick. Follow Constable Li." After so long, there's finally something to watch. Every time Li Mu went to the Ministry of Justice, there would be a large crowd of people following him. However, this time he wasn't the one bringing criminals to the Ministry of Justice. He was the one being sued. Ministry of Justice. The director of the Ministry of Justice paced anxiously in the courtyard. He didn't want to take this case at all. It wasn't easy for him to build a good relationship with Li Mu. He didn't want to waste all his previous efforts. However, that woman had sounded the grievance drum of the Ministry of Justice. The commoners were all watching outside, so he had to accept it. A moment later, he walked to the assistant minister's office and bowed to Zhou Zhong, who was sitting behind the table. He said, "Sir Assistant Minister, this case involves Master Li. I am worried that there will be a wrong judgment. How about we let Sir Assistant Minister preside over this case?" Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "All right." Li Mu arrived at the Ministry of Justice and entered the court. He saw Zhou Zhong sitting at the front and a woman kneeling at the front. The woman was in her early 20s. Her hair was messy and her face was filled with fear. When she saw Li Mu, she retreated a few steps and her eyes were filled with terror. This was the first time Li Mu had seen this woman, but she seemed to be very afraid of him. Zhou Zhong looked down at Li Mu and asked, "There is a case that involves Imperial Censor Li. I will now ask you a few questions and I hope you can answer truthfully." Li Mu said calmly, "Go ahead, Assistant Minister Zhou." Zhou Zhong said, "Where were you last night at midnight?" Li Mu said, "I was resting at home. Last night, he had been waiting for the Empress to fall asleep, and only slept very late." Zhou Zhong asked, "Is there a witness?" At midnight, Xiao Bai had already fallen asleep in her room. Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhou Zhong said, "The person kneeling in front of the court is a woman from Yonghe Lane. She came to the Ministry of Justice today to report that she was raped at home last night at midnight. According to her, the person who raped her was you, Imperial Censor Li. Do you have anything to say about this?" Li Mu looked at the woman and said, "I was at home last night and did not go out. It is even more impossible for me to go to Yonghe Lane and rape her. Why is this lady falsely accusing me?" Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and said, "If Lord Li has a clear conscience, can you allow me to perform a soul search?" A soul search was different from a soul search. Under a soul search, a person's memories would be flipped through without any secrets. A soul search was only used to ask specific questions, and was most often used by the government during investigations. A soul search was useless against Li Mu. The art of tranquility could keep one's heart calm at all times. Not to mention Zhou Zhong, even the Empress could not use a soul search to find out the secrets in Li Mu's heart. He said directly to Zhou Zhong, "Assistant Minister Zhou's soul-searching technique is useless against me. There is no need to expend any more mana. Furthermore, under the circumstances where there is no evidence, it is against the law to search the soul of the accused. The accuser should produce evidence and not have the accused prove his innocence. Zhou Zhong thought for a moment and nodded. He looked at the woman again and asked, Lady Su, you said that Censor Li raped you last night. Do you have evidence? Lady Su raised her head and said, I saw it with my own eyes and experienced it personally. It is the evidence. Zhou Zhong looked at her and said, Lord Li is an official of the imperial court. Since you want to accuse him, are you willing to accept a soul search? If you lie, I will punish you severely. Lady Su did not hesitate and said, I am willing. Zhou Zhong walked down and pressed his palm on her head. The woman's gaze gradually became dazed. After a moment, Zhou Zhong waved his hand and images appeared in front of everyone in the court. Although these images were static, it was not difficult to see what had happened last night when they were all connected. The images were very clear. It was obvious that a masked man in black had barged into the woman's house and violated her. At the critical moment, the woman pulled off the black cloth covering the man's face. Under the black cloth was Li Mu's face. Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and asked, Censor Li, do you have anything else to say? Li Mu did not explain anything. He only said, I believe that the Ministry of Justice will clear my name. Zhou Zhong said, although this case cannot be concluded, Lord Li, you are a major suspect. I'm afraid I can't let you leave the Ministry of Justice so easily. Men, take Li Mu into custody for now. After I investigate this case, I will try him again. 2 constables walked forward and said, Lord Li, please. In the court, the director of the Ministry of Justice had a look of disbelief. He said, That's impossible. I've seen the girl by Constable Li's side. She is 1,000 times more beautiful than this woman. How could Constable Li give up what is close at hand for what is far away? One of the constables said, That's not necessarily the case. How can a domestic flower be as fragrant as a wildflower? Some people might just like that. The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at Li Mu's back as he calmly left. Even important officials of the court would rarely be so calm when faced with a case like this. He was almost certain that Li Mu had a motive for being so calm. Zhou Zhong walked out of the court and was about to return to the yamen when a shout came from behind him. Stop. Zhang Chun angrily pointed at Zhou Zhong and said, You've so carelessly captured an official of the court. What can the memories of a mortal woman prove? Zhou Zhong asked calmly. The person who violated the woman looked exactly like Censor Li. Doesn't that prove anything? What does that prove? Zhang Chun snorted coldly and said, If I were to become Assistant Minister Zhou and do evil deeds, would you be blamed for the crime as well? Zhou Zhong asked, Lord Zhang, are you implying that a Realm 6 expert disguised himself as Censor Li to violate a woman and frame him for it? If Lord Zhang has Realm 6 cultivation and wants to frame me, the Imperial Clan Temple can use this as a reason to imprison me. Before the truth is out, I have nothing to say. Zhang Chun said, Transformation techniques don't necessarily require Realm 6 supernatural powers. Transformation talismans and transformation pills can also transform the body and disguise one's appearance. Zhou Zhong asked, Would someone use a heaven-grade Fulu and heaven-grade medicinal pill to frame Censor Li? Zhang Chun said coldly, Lord Li is dedicated to the people and offended all the officials of the fairy's capital. There are countless people in the fairy's capital who want to harm him. This is very likely. Zhou Zhong nodded and said, We can't rule out this possibility. However, we'll only know the truth after the Ministry of Justice's investigation. Zhang Chun flicked his sleeves and left. At this moment, the onlookers outside the Ministry of Justice were still discussing. Constable Li has been in there for so long. Why hasn't he come out yet? I don't know what happened either. Sigh, someone's coming out? A constable from the Ministry of Justice walked out and waved at the crowd. He said, What are you all doing here? Disperse, disperse. Some of the people went up and asked, What happened in there? Why hasn't Constable Li come out yet? Constable Li? The constable smiled disdainfully and said, To tell you the truth, I'm afraid Constable Li won't be coming out this time. What? What the hell is going on? Why can't Constable Li come out? Tell us clearly or we won't leave today. Seeing that the crowd was getting more and more agitated, the constable was worried that the officials would hold him accountable if things got out of hand. He hurriedly said, Your Constable Li is involved in a case of rape and has been sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison. Don't crowd around here. Disperse, disperse. As soon as he finished speaking, the onlookers were stunned for a moment before an even bigger commotion broke out. King Bullsh T. How dare you insult Constable Li? Constable Li isn't that kind of person. The Ministry of Justice must be trying to frame Constable Li. Dog official, Constable Li is such a good person. How dare you frame him? Everyone shout with me. Release him, release him. Release him. Release Constable Li. Inside the Ministry of Justice, hearing the deafening shouts outside, the constable of the Ministry of Justice sighed. If the people of Fairy's capital could treat me like this one day, my years as an official would have been worth it. An old official from the Ministry of Justice sighed. The person behind this is really scheming. No one knew about this at first, but with this commotion, everyone in Fairy's capital will know about it very soon. At that time, some people will definitely believe it. It's easy to ruin one's reputation, but it's hard to build one's reputation. If you want to kill someone, you have to go for their heart first. In a certain mansion in the North Court, a continuous conversation could be heard from a room. When the sound reached the door, it seemed to be blocked and absorbed by something and completely disappeared. Is that woman all right? She'll be fine. I asked someone to use the form disguise pill to transform into Li Mu's appearance. In that woman's eyes, the person who raped her was Li Mu. Even if the Ministry of Justice searched her soul, they would only see Li Mu. What if the Ministry of Justice searched Li Mu's soul? He's a cultivator and can tamper with his memories. Even if the Ministry of Justice searched his soul, the results wouldn't be enough to use as evidence. That woman is immortal, so her memories are more credible, but there will still be flaws. That's not important. Whether there are flaws or not depends on whether Li Mu is still favored or not. If His Majesty no longer protects him, he can be sent to his death with any random reason. After a short silence, a gnashing voice could be heard from the room. He must die, outside the Ministry of Justice. The people shouted for a while, but there was no response from the Ministry of Justice. Gradually they fell silent. When Constable Li worked for the people, he was fearless. No matter if the other party was an official or a noble, or even the high and mighty academy, he would always seek justice for the people. However, when he was imprisoned in the Ministry of Justice and the people wanted to seek justice for him, they realized that there was nothing they could do other than stand at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice and shout weakly. Constable Li can't be such a person. Someone must be framing him. He has offended too many people for the sake of the people. How can these people tolerate him? I heard that Constable Li has fallen out of favor with His Majesty. Perhaps that's why those people attacked Constable Li. But why did Constable Li fall out of favor? He has always worked for the people and for His Majesty. The expressions on the people's faces changed from helplessness to worry. At this moment, someone in the crowd suddenly said, "You may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. Perhaps that Li Mu has always been pretending. This is his true nature. Otherwise, why would the Ministry of Justice arrest him?" As soon as that person finished speaking, someone grabbed him by the collar and pulled him out of the crowd. A burly man lifted him up and glared at him. He shouted, "Who do you think you are? How dare you speak of Constable Li like that?" When Constable Li was beating up those hedonistic villains and abolishing the Silver Penalty Act for the people, where were you? When Constable Li struck young ruffian Zhou with lightning and made the decision for that pitiful family, where were you? When Constable Li fought against the 3 major academies and cried out for the countless victims in Fairy's capital, where were you? Now that Constable Li is being framed, you jump out. Tell me, are you hired by the person who framed Constable Li? What are you trying to do by slandering Constable Li? It would have been better if that person didn't speak. Once he did, the indignant anger in the people's hearts finally found an outlet. In the past 3 months, Li Mu had used his actions to prove what kind of person he was. No one in Fairy's capital had the right to criticize him. Although they were in the Great Zhou's capital of Fairy's capital, they had always been shrouded in darkness. It wasn't until Li Mu's appearance that the people finally saw a ray of light. Li Mu shone brightly in the hearts of the people of Fairy's capital. The only thing more dazzling than him was the sun in the sky. At this moment he was being framed and someone was taking advantage of the situation to sow discord. This completely enraged the people who were already angry. In an instant the people punched and kicked. The person who slandered Li Mu was immediately buried in their punches and kicks. If it weren't for the bailiffs from the Ministry of Justice who saw that something was wrong and stepped out to stop them, there would have been another tragic case in front of the Ministry of Justice before Li Mu's case was over. Because of the commotion in front of the Ministry of Justice, this case that was originally limited to the Ministry of Justice quickly spread. In the past few months, every incident related to Li Mu was at the heart of the storm in Fairy's capital. Naturally, his case spread very quickly. When the people of Fairy's capital heard this, they were naturally worried. However, there was nothing they could do. They could only silently march in front of the Ministry of Justice to express their protest. However, in the southern and northern courtyards, there were many voices that were different from the voices of the people. Ha Li, to think that you would have such a day. When you bullied my grandson, you didn't think that you would have such a day, right? In the past, you had His Majesty protecting you. This time, without His Majesty, I'd like to see how you'll die. Before I could do anything, someone else beat me to it. I wonder who hates him so much. Could it be the Zhou family? In the past 3 months, the officials and nobles of Fairy's capital, regardless of whether they were from the new or old parties, had formed grudges with Li Mu. When they heard that Li Mu had been imprisoned, they all clapped their hands in joy. They couldn't even be satisfied with hearing about Li Mu's tragic case from others. Many of them personally came to the Ministry of Justice to see for themselves. This undoubtedly made them even happier. Faced with the officials and nobles who wanted to visit Li Mu, the director of the Ministry of Justice was in a difficult position. Of course they could visit the prison. However, the Ministry of Justice had a rule that not everyone could visit the prison. There were rules regarding the identity of the person who visited the prison and the time of the visit. In principle, the relatives and friends of non-criminals were not allowed to visit the prison. However, the people who came to the Ministry of Justice were either officials or nobles. He couldn't afford to offend all of them. He walked to the assistant minister's office and asked Zhou Zhong, "Lord Assistant Minister, these people outside all want to visit the prison. Should we reject them?" "No need." Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, "If they want to visit, let them. However, each visit can only be 2 people at most. They can't stay for more than half an hour." Since the assistant minister had spoken, the director of the Ministry of Justice didn't say anything else. He nodded and said, "I'll make the arrangements now." The prison of the Ministry of Justice. In a neat and tidy prison cell. Li Mu stood in the middle of the cell. This was his first time in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Compared to the county and provincial yamen, the prison of the Ministry of Justice was cleaner and tidier. There wasn't any odor in the prison either. Zhou Zhong had arranged a good cell for him. The inside of the cell was spotless. Li Mu had wanted to use his spells to clean it up, but later found that there was no need. He wasn't shackled and his mana wasn't restricted. If he really wanted to leave, the prison of the Ministry of Justice wouldn't be able to hold him. However, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. He wanted to know who was so impatient that they were willing to use fulu and pills just to frame him. Footsteps came from outside. 2 people appeared outside the cell. One of them was someone Li Mu had seen before. It was the vice director of the Ministry of Revenue, Wei Teng. The other person was someone Li Mu didn't recognize. The person stood outside the cell and took the initiative to introduce himself. "Lord Li may not know who I am. Let me introduce myself. I am the director of the Ministry of Rights, Zhu Qi. Zhu Tsong is my son." Li Mu had already noticed that this person looked similar to Zhu Kong. He glanced at the 2 of them and asked, "What are you doing here?" Zhu Qi said, "I was shocked to hear that Lord Li was imprisoned. I wanted to come and take a look." Wei Ting quickly followed and said, "Lord Li is a pillar of the country and a favorite of His Majesty. How could he do such a despicable thing? If you need any help, just ask. I won't help you." Haha. Wei Ting looked at Li Mu in the cell and laughed happily. His hatred for Li Mu was even greater than Zhu Qi's. Because of Li Mu, he lost his nephew. His only younger brother lost his son. Since then he was unable to recover from the setback and cut off all contact with him. As for his son Wei Peng, he also suffered an unprecedented blow because of that incident. Since Wei Bin's execution, Wei Peng had never stepped out of the Wei mansion. He hugged a thick copy of the Law of Great Zhou all day long. He read it when he walked, when he ate, and even when he went to the toilet. Even when he slept, he would use the book as a pillow. Wei Ting saw his son's abnormality and his heart ached. He blamed all of this on Li Mu. Wei Ting and Zhu Qi laughed happily. Li Mu looked at them indifferently and said, "Scram." Wei Ting's face darkened. He said sternly, "Don't you know where you are? Don't you know your own situation? What right do you have to be arrogant in front of us?" Zhu Qi sneered and said, "I'd like to see how long you can be arrogant." At this moment, a prison guard walked in and said to the 2 of them, "Lords, it's time to visit the prisoners." The 2 of them looked at Li Mu mockingly again and turned to leave. Li Mu watched the 2 of them leave. He shook his head and said in a low voice, "It's not, they were not the ones who framed him." Soon, another person walked in from outside. It was an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. As soon as he entered the cell, he looked at Li Mu and said, "Lord Li, do you know me?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Who are you?" The old man snorted and said, I'm the deputy of Taichung Temple. 2 months ago you beat up my grandson 3 times and broke 5 of his ribs. You don't know who I am? Li Mu said, Is the Prime Minister of Taichung Temple senile? The one I hit was your grandson, not you. Why should I know you? The deputy of Taichung Temple pointed at him and said in a trembling voice, You're too arrogant. Li Mu said coldly, It's not the first time I've been so arrogant. Is this the first time you know? The Taichung Temple Deputy Prime Minister had come to mock Li Mu, but he did not expect that not only did Li Mu fail to mock him, but he also angered himself. He pointed at Li Mu, his beard trembling, and said angrily, I'll wait and see if you can still be so arrogant in a few days. After saying this, he angrily stormed off in a huff. Li Mu looked at the back of the deputy of Taichung Temple and shook his head. He said, Not really. The director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, and the deputy of Taichung Temple were the first to mock him. Obviously they were not the ones behind the scenes. Li Mu sighed as he stood in the prison cell. Usually he did not care. It was only at times like this that he realized how many enemies he had in Chengdu. There were so many that he did not even know who the mastermind was. A voice came from the door again and Li Mu's gaze followed it. His enemies in Chengdu were honest. They seemed to be afraid that they would come too late. After Li Mu was released from prison, they came to the Ministry of Justice one after another to sightsee. The 2 people who came this time were both women and they weren't young either. One of them had a rather charming figure, and was a young woman around 30 years old. The other person was even older and didn't even have a hint of charm. The 2 of them did not come close. They only glanced at Li Mu from afar and turned to leave without saying a word. The woman next to the young woman looked at Li Mu with a gaze filled with bone-deep hatred. Li Mu could feel a strong resentment and malice from her. Her disgust for Li Mu was even greater than that of the other 3 combined. Li Mu's eyes flashed. He sensed something and looked at the prison guard. He said, You come over here. The prison guard at the door ran over quickly and asked anxiously, What do you want? Li Mu glanced at him and asked, Who are the 2 women who came in just now? The prison guard shook his head and said, I don't know. Go and ask. Do you think you? The prison guard was indignant. After exchanging glances with Li Mu, he could not help but tremble and run out quickly. After a while he ran back in and said, I asked. It's the 4th Madam of the Zhou family and the wife of the Minister of Rights. The wife of the Minister of Rights is the daughter of the 4th Madam of the Zhou family. Director Zhou? Li Mu said the name softly. His guess was confirmed. There were many people in the divine capital who hated him, but Zhou Ting and his wife were definitely 2 people who hated him to the core. Their only son had died at the hands of Li Mu. Li Mu had always been wary of Zhou Ting, but after Zhou Ting left office, he stayed in the Zhou family and did not leave. Li Mu thought that he was plotting a bigger scheme, but he did not expect that the first to act would be his wife. Since he had found the mastermind, there was no need for him to stay in the Ministry of Justice. He looked at the prison guard again and said, Call Zhou Zhong over. The prison guard did not dare to talk back this time and ran out. Not long after, Zhou Zhong walked slowly into the prison. He looked at Li Mu and asked, Censor Li, do you have anything else to say? Li Mu said indifferently, That woman's matter has nothing to do with me. Someone framed her. Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, Lord Li's one-sided statement cannot be used as evidence. Li Mu asked, Did the person who raped that woman succeed? Zhou Zhong said, That woman from the Su family had her chastity taken last night. Li Mu looked at him and said, If that's the case, then this case cannot be done by me. Zhou Zhong asked, Why? Li Mu's face showed a trace of unnaturalness. He said, Because this official hashtag at Yen asterisk. Zhou Zhong took a step forward and tilted his ear. He said, I didn't hear you clearly. Please repeat yourself, Lord Li. Li Mu's forehead darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, Because this official's primordial yang is still there. Zhou Zhong's expression was clearly stunned. Not only him but even the prison guard was stunned. The 2 of them had never imagined that Li Mu would be able to use such a reason to clear himself of suspicion. But when they thought about it carefully, it seemed that no testimony would be as powerful as this one. This was a special case to begin with. That woman had been raped and her chastity taken. Naturally, that criminal had done something indescribable with her. In other words, the criminal of this case had to be someone who had been through it before. It was impossible for him to be a virgin. A man's primordial yang would be lost the first time he fused with a woman. If Li Mu's primordial yang was still there, then he naturally could not be the criminal who raped that woman. After Zhou Zhong came back to his senses, He looked at Li Mu and said, "I'll have to trouble Lord Li to extend your right hand." Li Mu impatiently extended his hand. Zhou Zhong was clearly not like Xiao Bai, who could see through his chastity with a single sentence. Zhou Zhong placed his hand on Li Mu's wrist and withdrew it a moment later. He immediately ordered the prison guard behind him, "Open the door." The prison guard hurriedly took out a key and opened the door. Li Mu walked out of the cell and glanced at Zhou Zhong. He said, "The Ministry of Justice, I'll remember this." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "You can't blame the Ministry of Justice. If Lord Li had been able to produce this evidence in court, then you wouldn't have been temporarily detained." Zhou Zhong was speaking nonsense. There were so many people in court. Using such a method to prove his innocence in front of those people was shameless, but Li Mu was. This was one reason. The other reason was that Li Mu wanted to lure the snake out of its hole, to draw out the true mastermind behind this case. Zhou Zhong walked to the door of the prison and extended his hand. He said, "Lord Li, please," at the same time that Li Mu and Zhou Zhong walked out of the prison in the Li residence. Xiao Bai was anxiously pacing around in the courtyard. Although she didn't go out, she still heard the people outside talking about the matter. Her benefactor was in danger, but she couldn't help it all. In the end, she gritted her teeth and took out a conch. After activating it with her mana, she said with a sobbing voice, "Sister Zhou, please save my benefactor." Jianghu Palace. Zhou Yi, who was sitting cross-legged on the brocade couch, entered an ethereal state to avoid her inner demons. Suddenly she opened her eyes. She waved her hand lightly and an image appeared in front of her. It was the image of Li Mu being locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Her expression changed slightly. Her figure flashed and appeared outside Jianghu Palace. She asked, "What happened to Li Mu?" Mr. Mei had also just received the news and was hesitating whether he should inform the Empress. He immediately said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu was framed and locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison." She finally could not hold back the doubts in her heart these past few days and asked, "Your Majesty, what did Li Mu do to make your Majesty unhappy?" Zhou Yi was puzzled. "Why do you ask?" Mr. Mei said helplessly, "Please forgive Mei Wei for asking too much. Your Majesty has been too cold to him these days, so much so that there are rumors in the court that your Majesty is dissatisfied with him. Li Mu has fallen out of favor. The only reason he can live peacefully in the fairies' capital is because your Majesty has his back. He can't live without your Majesty. Once your Majesty abandons him, the various forces in the fairies' capital will make a move on him." Zhou Yi couldn't tell Mei Wei that she was avoiding Li Mu because she wanted to control her inner demons. She also didn't expect that her actions would cause such serious consequences. Mr. Mei continued, "Li Mu can't live without your Majesty. Your Majesty's actions will disappoint him. With his personality, your Majesty might lose him forever." Not only Li Mu couldn't live without her, but she couldn't live without Li Mu either. In this cold court, only Li Mu could bring her some warmth. Zhou Yi had already realized the severity of the situation. She said, "Go to the Ministry of Justice and bring him out immediately." "Forget it, I'll go myself." As soon as he finished speaking, his face turned into Mr. Mei's and he disappeared into thin air. Ministry of Justice. Li Mu walked out of the prison and found a group of people outside. The director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, and the minister of the Taichung Temple hadn't left yet. They were shocked when they saw Zhou Zhong and Li Mu walk out. Why is he out? Why did the Ministry of Justice let him out? Is there any law here? Zhou Zhong walked in front of them and said, "This case has nothing to do with Lord Li. The Ministry of Justice caught him by mistake." The minister of the Taichung Temple said angrily, "That woman has already identified him. You've also searched her soul. This case was obviously done by Li Mu. How can you protect him like this?" Zhou Zhong said calmly, "The Ministry of Justice only cares about evidence when handling cases. Lord Li has evidence to prove that this case has nothing to do with him." The director of the Ministry of Rights said in disbelief, "What evidence?" Zhou Zhong glanced at Li Mu and said, "Lord Li is still a Yuanyang body." As soon as he finished speaking, there was silence in the room. There was no better reason than this to clear him of suspicion in this case. After all, it was impossible for a rapist to still be a virgin after the rape. Perhaps even the mastermind behind the scenes would never have guessed that Li Mu was a fledgling. They couldn't understand why Li Mu was such a handsome man. He could have any woman he wanted. How could he be a virgin? Moreover, the woman beside him was so beautiful. How could he hold himself back? Was he even a man? Seeing everyone's eyes and expressions, Li Mu wished he could sew Zhou Zhong's mouth shut. However, he was no match for Zhou Zhong. His gaze swept across the director of the Ministry of Rites, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, and the minister of the Taichung Temple. He said, "You guys are very good." The three of them felt a chill run down their spines straight to their heads. No one expected that Li Mu would be able to escape so quickly. Based on his past temperament, the three of them probably wouldn't have a good life in the future. Looking at Li Mu's back as he left, the director of the Ministry of Rites said with a pale face, "What do we do now?" The minister of the Ministry of Revenue snorted and said, "What are you afraid of? The current Li Mu is no longer the Li Mu of the past. Without His Majesty, what is he?" The minister of the Taichung Temple was also relieved. He agreed and said, "That's right. He escaped once, but can he escape a second time or a third time? There are countless people in Luoyang who want him dead. He won't be able to jump around for long." The three of them comforted themselves in such a way, and their anxious hearts finally relaxed. Zhou Zhong glanced at them and asked, "Are the three of you so sure that Li Mu has really fallen out of favor?" The three of them, who had just relaxed, suddenly became worried again. The director of the Ministry of Rites asked, "Sir Zhou, what do you mean by that?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "It's hard to fathom a ruler's heart. Once in favor, once out of favor, once out of favor, and once again back into favor. This has happened a lot in history. You guys are too impatient." When Li Mu walked out of the Ministry of Justice, he was surprised to see Mr. Mei walk in. Mr. Mei was surprised to see Li Mu. He asked, "Why did you come out?" Li Mu said, "I didn't do it in the first place. It'll be fine as long as I explain it clearly." Mr. Mei asked, "How did you explain it?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "That's not important." He looked up at the sky and said, "It's almost lunchtime. Sister Mei, do you want to go home with me and have a meal before going back to the palace?" Mr. Mei thought for a moment and said, "His Majesty hasn't eaten yet. I'll go back and ask His Majesty first." Li Mu said lightly, "It's better not to call His Majesty. There's not enough food at home. There's only enough for 3 people. Mr. Mei said, "Then I'll go to the market with you to buy some food." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Forget it. I suddenly don't feel like cooking. I'll just go back and eat some steamed buns and salted vegetables with Xiaobai. Goodbye, Sister Mei." Mr. Mei watched Li Mu's figure disappear from her sight. She stood there in a daze, with a confused and helpless expression on her face. After a moment, she withdrew her gaze and slowly walked toward the palace gate. Jianghu Palace. Zhou looked at Mr. Mei and asked, "Was I really wrong?" Mr. Mei's lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. When Her Majesty was young, she focused on cultivation and rarely had contact with others. She was used as a pawn by the Zhou family. After she ascended the throne, she was high above the masses and no one around her could talk to her. Although she wasn't young, she didn't have much experience and didn't know how to get along with others. Almost everyone around her was respectful to her. They only obeyed her and did not dare to resist. However, Li Mu did not belong to that almost exception. She couldn't say that the Empress was wrong. She could only say, "I hope Your Majesty doesn't blame Li Mu. He's loyal to Your Majesty and is full of passion. It's inevitable that he'll feel sad and disappointed when something like this happens. This shows that he's really loyal to Your Majesty." Zhou thought for a moment and said, "Then it's my fault." It was nighttime. Li Mu lay on the bed, unable to calm down. He didn't care about being framed and imprisoned because those people were his enemies. This was what his enemies should do. Meanwhile, he had been loyal and devoted to the Empress, clearing all obstacles for her. He had even cared about her life, relieving her of her worries and boredom. He had invited her to his home for a meal, and had even cooked her favorite food. However, his passion had been exchanged for indifference and alienation. He felt that it wasn't worth it. The human world wasn't worth it. He even considered whether he should take Xiaobai back to the North County. At most, he wouldn't need the psyche power of the people of Shindu. He didn't want to continue staying in this sad place. As he thought about it, he suddenly felt tired. He uncontrollably entered a dream and saw a familiar figure in the dream. Li Mu didn't want to see her now. He silently recited the clear heart chant and woke up from the dream. Tiredness came again and he entered the dream again. He silently recited the clear heart chant and woke up from the dream again. Enter the dream, wake up. Enter the dream, wake up. After more than 10 times, Li Mu didn't feel tired anymore. However, there was another figure in front of his bed. Zhou looked down at him and said, "I was wrong." Li Mu immediately froze on the bed. To be able to connect the words "I" and "I was wrong" was an inconceivable thing. After he came back to his senses, he got up from the bed and asked subconsciously, "Where did you go wrong?" P.S. This book has 10,000 words. 6,000 is the basic update, and 4,000 is the main update. When I was thinking about this plot yesterday, I felt that it would be better to finish it in one go. I specially set an alarm in the morning and wrote for about 10 hours. Now my eyes hurt and I have a headache, so I'm going to sleep. There will be no more updates today. Readers reading outside the website, if you think the writing is pleasing to your eyes, I hope you can come to the Chinese website to support the original version. Thank you. Chapter 296. As soon as Li Mu opened his mouth, he felt that it was somewhat inappropriate to ask this question. After all, she was the empress, the ruler of a country. He could not treat the empress like Lu Hanyan. However, he thought about it again. What was wrong with the empress? Was it natural for the empress to do something wrong? He was loyal to her not because she was the empress, nor was it because she was beautiful. It was only because she had obtained his approval. If she didn't know where she went wrong this time, it was very likely that she would do it again next time. She could always be cold to him and she could also always be warm to him, but she couldn't always be hot and cold to him. Li Mu was working for her, not in love with her. What was this? Zhou Yi stood in front of the bed and thought for a while. She then said, "It was my fault for not being considerate enough and giving some people in the court an opportunity to take advantage of me and bring you so much trouble." She did not understand the main point of the matter. Li Mu gently shook his head and said, "I am not afraid of trouble, nor am I afraid of any enemy. As long as your majesty is behind me, even if my enemy is the entire court or the entire world, so what? What I am afraid of is that, for your majesty and the great Zhou, I will make the entire world my enemy, but when I turn around I will find that there is no one behind me." In the darkness, Zhou Yi's gaze was somewhat absent-minded. She had never thought that someone would make the entire world his enemy for her. But after thinking about it, she realized that in the past few months, Li Mu had indeed done this. But what had she done? She had abandoned him and left him to face countless enemies alone. The reason he had so many enemies was not because of himself, but because of the great Zhou, because of her. Li Mu looked at the silent Zhou Yi and asked, "I would like to ask your majesty if I have done something to make your majesty unhappy. If I have offended your majesty, would your majesty please make it clear? Even if your majesty wants me to die, please let me die with a clear understanding. Do not let me be muddle-headed. No, no." Zhou Yi couldn't tell the truth in front of Li Mu. He could only say, "Yes, it was Zhen who encountered an inner demon. These days, Zhen has been suppressing the inner demon and has no time to care about other things. Therefore Zhen neglected you." Li Mu was stunned for a moment. Then shock appeared on his face. Her Majesty was a 7th realm transcendent cultivator. The inner demons of a cultivator of this level were extremely terrifying. Once the inner demons were born, their cultivation would be stagnant. This was already the best outcome. If it was more serious, his cultivation would regress, his mind would be affected by his inner demons, or he might even die. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. So it was only the Empress suppressing her inner demons. He had thought that he had fallen out of favor. It was a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. It's not a big deal. He raised his head to look at the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, please recite with me. Your heart is as clear as ice. You will not be alarmed even if the sky collapses. You will remain steadfast. You will be happy and calm. You will not be stained by dirt. You will not be stained by vulgar things." In the end, the reason why inner demons were born was because the mind was in chaos. The art of tranquility was used to calm the mind. It wasn't just for inner demons. Soul manipulation arts, illusion arts, seduction arts, dream invading arts, and other arts that could affect one's mind to perform arts were all trash in front of the art of tranquility. Although this wasn't the most basic way to suppress inner demons, it was very effective in avoiding them. Heart is as clear as ice. You will not be alarmed even if the sky collapses? Zhou Yi didn't understand, but she still recited a few words in her heart with Li Mu. Then, a look of surprise appeared on her face. Ever since she came here, she had been suppressing the throbbing in her heart and suppressing the inner demons. With her 7th realm strength, it was still a bit difficult for her to completely suppress the inner demons. But after reciting a few words, the throbbing in her heart calmed down. This was obviously a spell that could quickly calm the mind. There were many spells for calming the mind in both Buddhism and Taoism. The royal family also had many secret spells. These days, Zhou Yi tried them one by one, but they didn't have much effect. Only the few spells that Li Mu taught her had an immediate effect. Her heart immediately calmed down, and she no longer felt the throbbing of her inner demons. Li Mu looked at Zhou Yi and asked, "Your Majesty, are you feeling better?" Zhou Yi nodded and said, "Much better." Li Mu explained, the art of tranquility can calm one's mind under any circumstances, but using it to suppress one's inner demons is still a temporary solution. Your Majesty, if you want to completely solve your inner demons, you have to start from the source. Zhou Yi said unnaturally, I know. To start from the source she had to start from Li Mu. But how should she start? She was silent for a while, then looked at Li Mu again and said, from now on I will always stand behind you. No matter what you encounter, just do it. You have me. With these words, Li Mu was much more relieved. But he couldn't help but regret and blame himself for misunderstanding the Empress. He had almost wronged her. At this time Zhou Yi asked again, do you know who set you up? Li Mu said, someone changed into my appearance, defiled that woman and framed me. If it wasn't a Dongxian master, then someone used a transformation talisman and a false form elixir. The false form divine power could change one's body into a man or a woman, big or small, or a divine bird or a strange beast. It could only be used by see-through Shen stage cultivators who had a profound cultivation base. This was not a simple illusion, but an essential change from the inside to the outside. It was a great magical power beyond the understanding of ordinary people. The Dongxian magical power was extremely difficult to carve fulu and refine elixirs. Therefore it was extremely rare and ranked in the heavenly realm. The heavenly realm fulu and elixirs were extremely difficult to carve and refine because of the precious materials. Most cultivators would choose to use them for attack or defense. This kind of fulu or elixir that didn't have great power but had special uses was even rarer. The Empress shook her head slightly and said, it can't be Dongxian. There are not many masters in Dongxian. If they did, I would have sensed it. Someone must have used a false form fulu or elixir. Do you have any suspects? Li Mu nodded and said, I suspect it was Zhou Chu's mother. She has been holding a grudge against Zhou Chu for what happened last time. I saw her today in the prison of the Ministry of Justice. Fourth aunt? The Empress sighed softly and said, she is my family. I can't tell if she has anything to do with this. Old Wang once said that no one could predict everything. There were many limitations in the art of divination. The closer one was to the person, the less accurate the result would be. Most of the time, the result of divination was only a sign or a feeling. It couldn't be confirmed at all. Even though Zhou Ting's wife wasn't related to the Empress by blood, they were still related by blood. Li Mu pondered for a moment before continuing, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, the wife of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights was with her. The Empress counted with her fingers and her face gradually turned cold. She said in a low voice, it is indeed him. She looked at Li Mu gently and said, don't worry. I will get justice for you. Li Mu slept soundly that night. He no longer resented the Empress. What the Empress said later made him feel completely at ease. He even dreamed of the Empress in his dream. It wasn't the Empress who entered the dream, but Li Mu who dreamt of his own accord. If the Empress used the dream entering technique to invade Li Mu's dream, she would be able to see that there was another her in the dream. Li Mu originally enjoyed this dream very much. In the dream, he and the Empress relied on each other to keep each other warm. She supported Li Mu from behind, and Li Mu cut through all obstacles for her. He swept away all obstacles in the imperial court, subdued the Yao nation, pacified the ghost realm, suppressed the dragon race of the four seas, conquered the barbarians and unified the countries of the Zhou continent. He also opened up new territory for the Great Zhou, conquered the 10 continents and 3 islands, and completed the unification of the world. He made the 10 continents live in peace and all the countries pay homage to him. Then the Empress conferred him the title of Empress. When the officials attended court, he often accompanied the Empress. After court, he nestled in her arms with a shy face. No. Li Mu suddenly woke up from his dream. He sat up on the bed and looked around. Thinking about the dream just now, his face was full of shock. The dream just now was simply too scary. In the dream, not only did he have to be a cow or horse for the Empress, he even had to sleep with her. Which normal man would want to marry an Empress? But then again, although her status was high and she was powerful, it wasn't impossible for her to be a wife. In this day and age, which wife could not be unreasonable, admit her mistakes and protect her husband? She was rich and powerful. Although she wasn't gentle and considerate enough, she was able to put down her pride and identity to take the initiative to admit her mistake instead of being unforgiving and unreasonable. Such a woman was hard to find even if one searched for a lantern. As Li Mu thought about it, he suddenly slapped himself and said angrily, "Bah, scumbag." Lu Hanyan was still in the North County, but he actually had such thoughts about the Empress. He really shouldn't have. After reflecting on himself for a while, Li Mu got up and washed up with Xiao Bai's help. The two ghosts had already prepared breakfast. After Li Mu finished eating, he went to the palace and prepared to go to court. At the entrance of the palace, the morning court had not started yet. The officials were already waiting outside the palace. In the line of officials, many people were discussing what happened yesterday. Li Mu was arrested and sent to the Ministry of Justice. Although they did not know why he was released later, the Empress did not interfere from beginning to end. What did this mean? It meant that Li Mu's fall from grace was very likely true. A few days ago, when the news of Li Mu's fall from grace spread like wildfire, many of them had been observing the situation from afar. After all, the Empress's heart was unpredictable. No one knew whether Li Mu's fall from grace was true or false. If the news was wrong, they would be impulsively attacking Li Mu and angering the Empress. Wouldn't they be courting death? Everyone was waiting for the first person to test the waters. They did not expect that someone would be so impatient. It had only been a few days, but they could not wait to attack Li Mu. This gave them a chance to verify it. Although Li Mu was released from the Ministry of Justice yesterday, he seemed to have used some method to prove his innocence. The Empress did not say anything about what had happened to him. This had already sent out a strong signal to everyone. If someone used this method to prove that the Empress did not care about Li Mu, he would be removed from the divine capital in less than a month. He would never appear in front of everyone again. Chapter 297. The imperial court had been peaceful for so long, and the sudden appearance of a disruptor was something that no one wanted to see. Perhaps Li Mu had no selfish motives, but it was precisely because of this that he was an eyesore. Without him, whether it was the old or new parties or the other officials, their days would be much more comfortable. Before the imperial court, no discussion is allowed. While the officials were whispering, a stern voice came from outside the group of officials, interrupting their whispers. Everyone looked over and saw Li Mu wandering outside the group, his sharp gaze sweeping over the crowd. Li Mu was the imperial censor of the imperial court. His main responsibility was to inspect the officials' manners during the imperial court and correct their improper behavior. The emperor used to use him as a personal guard, but now that Li Mu had fallen out of favor, he was only the imperial censor of the imperial court. He had the right to reprimand the officials before the imperial court. The crowd stopped talking, but they sneered in their hearts. The days when he could strut around like this were numbered. Li Mu walked to a certain place and looked at an official. The physician of the Board of Rights, Zhu Qi, also looked at Li Mu, his heart inexplicably weak. Li Mu coldly asked, "What are you looking at?" This was not the past, when the silver law of guilt had been abolished. Zhu Qi did not believe that if he looked at Li Mu one more time, Li Mu would dare to beat him like he had beaten his son in front of the officials. If he really dared to do so, he would not be far from death. Zhu Qi coldly snorted and asked, "What, can't I look at you?" Li Mu shrugged and said, "Of course you can." Zhu Qi looked at him, his gaze even more unbridled, a trace of mockery in his contempt. Li Mu's tone changed and he said, "You can look at me, but you are not wearing your official hat properly. According to the law, you will be caned 10 times and your salary will be deducted for half a month. Men, drag the physician of the Board of Rights to the side, seal his cultivation, and punish him with 10 canes as a warning to others." Zhu Qi's expression changed as he shouted, "How can there be such a law?" Li Mu stretched out his hand and a copy of the Great Zhou Laws appeared in his hand. He flipped to a page and pointed it out to Zhu Qi, saying, "Look for yourself. The third article of the 35th volume of the Great Zhou Laws states that officials must tidy up their attire before attending court. Those who are disheveled will be regarded as disrespectful in front of the monarch. Their salary will be deducted for half a month and they will be caned 10 times. Have I said anything wrong?" Zhu Qi stared blankly at this clause. It was written in black and white. Unless Li Mu had the guts to change the laws of Great Zhou, what he said was true. Tampering with the laws of Great Zhou was a capital offense. There was no way he would fabricate this just to give him 10 beatings. Li Mu shook his head and said, "This is the rule set by the previous emperor. You didn't follow it when it came to His Majesty. It is clear that you have no respect for His Majesty. If I don't teach you a lesson today, I'm afraid you won't respect His Majesty in the future." He looked at the 2 guards in front of the palace and said, "What are you waiting for? Start the punishment." The 2 guards looked at each other and didn't move. They hadn't been on duty for long and hadn't heard of this rule. Mr. May walked over from afar and looked at the 2 lightly. He asked, "Didn't you hear what Sir Li said?" Disrespectful in front of the palace was a serious offense in the previous emperor's time. 10 beatings is already a light punishment. What are you waiting for? Seeing that Commander Mei had spoken, the two didn't dare to hesitate. They walked up to Zhu Qi and said, "Sir, please?" Zhu Qi's expression was stiff and his throat moved. He walked with difficulty and left with the two guards. Li Mu used the law to suppress him. He didn't even have a chance to resist. He swore in his heart that when he returned, he would take a good look at the laws of Great Zhou. What kind of bullsh*t rule was this? Zhu Qi was taken away to receive his punishment. The officials beside him were very nervous. Some of them even used their mana to adjust their official hats. Some of the officials who had been on the court during the previous emperor's time even remembered the rules of the previous emperor's time. Disrespectful in front of the palace was a crime that existed during the previous emperor's time. Many officials had been punished because of this. After the empress succeeded the throne, she didn't care about this anymore. When the officials went to court, they also became casual. Most importantly, they didn't have to worry about it anymore. Who would have thought that Li Mu would bring this up again today? He brought out all the provisions of the law. No one could say that he was wrong unless the officials all agreed to abolish this law. But that was a matter for the future. Li Mu didn't care about the frightened officials and continued to patrol outside. As he walked, his footsteps stopped again. He stood in front of Wei Ting, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue. Wei Ting's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He finally understood what Li Mu meant when he said those last words to the three of them yesterday. Revenge. This was undisguised revenge. Li Mu stood in front of Wei Ting. At first glance he didn't find anything strange. At second glance he also didn't find anything strange. So he began to look carefully, up and down, front and back, left and right. At this moment Wei Ting really wanted to curse. When Li Mu walked past the other officials he only glanced at them. When he came to Wei Ting, he had already looked at them for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Wei Ting's official hat was properly worn and his clothes were neat. But his efforts didn't let him down. Li Mu still found a stain on his sleeve. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Lord Wei, the official robes you are wearing aren't just official robes. They are also the symbol of the Great Zhou, the face of the court. The previous emperor requested that when the officials go to court, their clothes must be neat and tidy, and their official robes must not be stained. Have you forgotten?" The two guards who had punished Zhu Qi had already returned. Li Mu looked at Wei Ting, his expression gradually becoming cold. He said, "Forfeit your salary for half a month, 10 strokes of the cane." After the two guards examined him, they also took Wei Ting away. Li Mu continued forward. The director of the Ministry of Justice lowered his head to look at a conspicuous hole in his official robes. Sweat began to seep out of his forehead. The director of the Ministry of Rights just didn't wear his hat properly, and the vice director of the Ministry of Revenue just had a stain on his sleeve, yet he was already beaten 10 times. His official robes had a hole. He had lost the face of the court. Wouldn't he be beaten at least 50 times? He looked at Li Mu out of the corner of his eye and found that he had already walked in front of him. He stopped in front of him. His gaze wasn't right. He seemed to be looking at the hole in his official robes. "It's over, it's over." He found it. Li Mu walked in front of the director of the Ministry of Justice, gave him a look and slowly walked past him. The director of the Ministry of Justice froze in place. Li Mu was letting him go just like that? After Li Mu left for a long time and didn't come back, he finally felt completely at ease. Li Mu really had let him go. Although it was clear that he was taking revenge on the 3 people who had gone to the Ministry of Justice to watch the show yesterday, the 2 of them also had old grudges. Whether he would be punished or not, it would be up to Li Mu to decide. The director of the Ministry of Justice heaved a sigh of relief and felt a little touched. It seemed that Li Mu had indeed forgotten the grudges between them and remembered that he had helped him before. Li Mu was different from other people in the court. Although Li Mu was sometimes annoying, he was a person who could distinguish between kindness and hatred. He was a person worthy of deep friendship. Walking past the director of the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu went straight to the side of the minister of Taichung Temple. The minister of Taichung Temple looked ahead. Even though he had already guessed that Li Mu would not let him go easily after taking revenge on the director of the Ministry of Rights and the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, he was not afraid. He had a slight obsession with cleanliness. Normally he would often use disguising techniques. His official robes were impervious to fire and water, dirt, holes and dirt. His official hat was also properly worn. Even with Li Mu's discerning eyes, he could not find anything that could be used against him. Li Mu walked in front of the minister of Taichung Temple and sized him up for a long time. He could not find anything wrong with him. His official robe was spotless. It was obvious that he had cast a concealment technique on it. His official hat was also properly worn. Under such circumstances, if Li Mu still made things difficult for him, it would mean that he was trying to harm him. He observed for a while more and suddenly looked at the feet of the minister of Taichung Temple. The minister of Taichung Temple also noticed Li Mu's actions. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he had woken up in a hurry and put on his shoes the wrong way? He did not remember. However, after this thought appeared in his mind, he felt that his feet were somewhat uncomfortable. Especially since Li Mu had been staring at his feet for a long time without saying anything. This made him panic. Finally, he could not help but look down. Luckily, there was nothing wrong with his shoes. However, because he lowered his head, the official hat on his head accidentally bumped into the hat of an official in front of him. It fell to the ground. Li Mu looked regretfully at the minister of Taichung Temple and said, "Someone? Today's morning court session was a little different from usual. Other than the officials at the very front, most of the officials standing in the middle and at the back of the court were standing straight. Their official robes were neat and their official hats were properly placed. They were much more energetic than usual. This was because there were 3 officials who had already been fined their salaries and given beatings because of their impoliteness in front of the court. The atmosphere in the court was also different from usual because of this. They did not know what was wrong with Li Mu today. He suddenly brought up the old system of the previous emperor. It should be known that before this, he was strongly opposed to the various systems established by the previous emperor. Only a few people, such as the Minister of Justice, understood why the 3 officials were punished. Li Mu stood in the corner. This was the only thing he felt that the previous emperor had left behind that was useful in his decades on the throne. Yesterday, the 3 of them had said that they wanted to see how long Li Mu could be arrogant. Today he would let them see with their own eyes. The person who presided over the morning court session today was still Mr. Mei. As soon as Mr. Mei announced the start of the morning court session, Zhang Chun stood up and said, "Your Majesty, I have a report." He held the ceremonial tablet and said, "I want to impeach the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Zhong." As the Assistant Minister of Justice, he abused his power and imprisoned Imperial Censor Li Mu on a groundless charge. Where is the dignity of the law? Li Mu was comforted. Elder Zhang was his only true friend in the entire court. When he became successful in the future, he would treat him better. Mr. Mei looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "Mr. Zhou, what do you have to say?" Zhou Zhong said, "Mr. Zhang is lying. As the Assistant Minister of Justice, I handled the case according to the law. That woman was raped, and I saw from her memory that the person who raped her looked similar to Imperial Censor Li. It was reasonable and legal to detain him temporarily. Later, Imperial Censor Li told me that he was still a Yuanyang body. After he was cleared of suspicion, I immediately let him go. How is this abuse of power?" Hearing this, the courtiers were in an uproar. I was wondering why the Ministry of Justice suddenly let him go. So his Yuanyang body is not broken? It can be cleared of suspicion like this? This is unheard of. I have learned something new. Is he really a Yuanyang body? Li Mu glared fiercely at Zhou Zhong with a murderous gaze. When he realized that everyone in the hall was looking at him, he quietly moved his feet and hid himself behind a pillar. Wei Teng was limping around in the courtyard. He had taken some medicinal pills and used Fulu. His injuries were much better now. When he heard about what had happened after the court was dismissed, he was overjoyed. This would be the last time he suffered a loss at the hands of Li Mu. As long as the emperor no longer protected him with the power of the old party, Li Mu would be at their mercy. Ministry of Rights Assistant Minister's Estate. A woman said hatefully, "I didn't succeed last time. This time I'll make sure she dies without a complete corpse." The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor caused quite a stir among the officials and nobles. In front of the Li Manor, Zhang Chun knocked on the door with a worried expression. This time he was really panicking. Li Mu had been framed, but the emperor was indifferent. After the court was dismissed, he went to see the emperor but was rejected. The matter was much more serious than he had imagined. He didn't want to live in a big house with 5 entrances. He also didn't want to have a group of maids and servants. As a friend, he had to remind Li Mu to leave the divine capital as soon as possible. He had to get further and further away from here and never come back. As for himself, he had to consider resigning from his position. Zhang Chun knocked on the door of the courtyard. As soon as the door opened, he smelled a fragrance. It was the familiar fragrance of hot pot. Li Mu stood at the door and asked, "Why are you here, old Zhang?" Zhang Chun was about to speak when he suddenly saw a figure beside the stove in the courtyard. It was a beautiful woman. She was putting a piece of tofu from the pot into a bowl. The moment he saw the woman's face, Zhang Chun's head buzzed. The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor had spread like wildfire. Who would have thought that the Empress would refuse Li Mu's request to see her and eat hot pot with him in the Li Manor an hour later? No one would believe it if he told them about it. When he came back to his senses, he immediately looked at Li Mu and said, "It's nothing. I just came to tell you that we should have a meal together when you're free." Li Mu said, "We're eating. Do you want to come in and eat with us?" Zhang Chun quickly waved his hand and said, "I can't today. Maybe another day. My wife is waiting for me at home. Goodbye." He turned around and left. However, he did not return to his residence. Instead, he went to a broker in the divine capital and said to a broker, "Check if there are any empty courtyards in the divine capital. I won't consider those below the 5th rank. As long as they're above the 5th rank." Ministry of Justice. After the director of the Ministry of Justice reported to Zhou Zhong, he could not help but ask, "Sir, has Lord Li really fallen out of favor?" Zhou Zhong said calmly, "I'm afraid only His Majesty knows about this." The director shook his head and said, "What a pity." He then realized that he had misspoken. He looked up and was relieved when he saw that the assistant minister did not hear him. Zhou Zhong stood up and walked out of the Ministry of Justice. The director hurriedly chased after him and asked, "Where are you going, sir?" "I still have some things to report." Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, "Let's talk about it tomorrow. I have an appointment with a friend today. We're going fishing outside the city." Ministry of Rights. An official walked into a government office and said to someone in the office, "Director Liu, the assistant minister is going to impeach Li Mu tomorrow. Should we follow him?" That person looked up at him and asked, "Why should we follow the assistant minister's impeachment?" The official said, "The assistant minister has this intention. You've just come to the Ministry of Rights, so you shouldn't curry favor with the assistant minister. After all, Li Mu has fallen out of favor. You don't have to worry about His Majesty blaming you for impeaching him. Perhaps His Majesty is waiting for someone to impeach him." That person waved his hand and said, "If you want to go, you go." "I'm not going." The director of the Ministry of Rights left helplessly. The Ministry of Rights originally only had one director. Later, for the imperial examinations, the imperial court added another one. However, this new director Liu did not seem to understand the ways of officialdom. Director Zhu was biased towards the old party. However, he did not dare to disobey the assistant minister. He had just come to the Ministry of Rights, but if he did not listen to the assistant minister, he would not have a good life in the future. After the director of the Ministry of Rights left, Director Liu curled his lips and said, "Impeach my ass. A bunch of idiots." Prince Shou's residence. Prince Shou liked to listen to operas. In addition to the stage built in the residence, there was also more than one opera troupe. Today he seemed to be particularly interested. After listening to a few plays, he waved his hand at the performers on the stage and said, "I'm not listening to Prince Consort Shui today. Sing Taizu Fishing for me, Zhou residence." During the meal in the Zhou residence, Zhou Xiong ate a few mouthfuls and put down his chopsticks. He looked at Zhou Jing and said, "Big brother, this time, Li Mu will not be able to escape this calamity. Should we call fourth brother out? If he sees this scene he will be very happy. Will not be able to escape this calamity?" Zhou Jing looked at him and asked, "How so?" Zhou Xiong said, "Li Mu has already lost the emperor's favor. As far as I know this time, whether it's our people or the old party, they all want to get rid of Li Mu completely. Fourth brother hates him to the bone. We have to let him see it with his own eyes." Zhou Jing put down his chopsticks and said, "Use your brain and think about it." With Wuer's personality, even if it's not her close official, if any official in the imperial court was framed and slandered in such a despicable way, she will not do anything. Will she not let the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court investigate? Zhou Xiong was stunned and said in shock, "This?" Zhou Jing said, "How can I not understand my own daughter? If she wasn't really angry she wouldn't have done this." The next morning court will probably be very lively. Zhou Xiong's expression changed and said, "What should we do? The matter of framing Li Mu was obviously instigated by my sister-in-law. The director of the Ministry of Rights is in danger. We have to remind him that the imperial examination is imminent. Nothing can happen to him, it's too late." Zhou Jing said, "Last time the Zhou family didn't do as she wanted. Now she hates you and me to the bone. She won't even return to the Zhou family and won't listen to you. If she had succeeded in framing Li Mu last time, it would have been fine. But if she had failed, the director of the Ministry of Rights would have been lost. It's too late for you to remind her now. Zhou Xiong was stunned and muttered, could this be Li Mu's scheme again? Zhou Jing didn't deny it and said, I'm afraid that even his fall from grace last time was fake news released by him and Wu. Zhou Xiong said with a sullen face, Her Majesty used to be so naive and pure. How did she become like this? She couldn't think of such a method. That Li Mu is as cunning as a fox. He must have taught Her Majesty the wrong things? He thought for a moment and asked, should we remind the others? No need. Zhou Jing shook his head and said, if they can't even see through such a simple trick, they are useless. They should give up their positions as soon as possible and let someone capable take over. Li residence. Li Mu put the fish and tofu that the Empress liked to eat into the pot and asked with concern, how is Her Majesty's inner demon? Zhou Yi picked up a piece of tofu and blew on it gently. She took a small bite and said, it's all thanks to the chant you taught me. It's much better now. For some reason, ever since her inner demon first appeared, she would see Li Mu and it would throb uncontrollably. But after the morning court session, even without the chant, the inner demon didn't appear again. Perhaps it was because she imagined that Li Mu had been through hundreds of battles, which left such a shadow in her heart. But in reality he was just like her, inexperienced. After realizing this fact, she felt much better. Li Mu was relieved when he heard this and picked up a piece of tofu for himself. According to the Empress's intentions, she would expose the director of the Ministry of Rights during today's morning court session, cripple his cultivation, and banish him. But Li Mu stopped her. Li Mu knew very well that the director of the Ministry of Rights and the mother behind him weren't the only ones who wanted his life. This time he might as well take advantage of the situation and give them a collective surprise. So he proposed to join forces with the Empress and pretend that he had fallen out of favor. This would send a wrong signal to those who were ready to make a move. Finally, with the help of the case of the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, they could catch them all in one fell swoop. After this incident, he believed that the remaining people would be much more obedient. The Empress agreed to Li Mu's plan without even thinking about it. The two of them had already put on the show and released the bait. Now they were just waiting for the fish to take the bait. Crepe Myrtle Palace. Today's morning court session was held as scheduled. Since the end of the previous morning court session, many people in the court had been looking forward to today's session. The morning court session had just begun when another official stood up and said loudly, Your Majesty, I have a memorial. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue held up a memorial and said, I would like to impeach the constable of the Luoyang Yamen, Li Mu. During his patrol, he often hung around the music hall and neglected his duties. As soon as he finished speaking, the director of the Ministry of Rights also stood up and said, I would also like to impeach Li Mu. During his tenure, he accepted bribes from the people. The deputy director of the Taichung Temple also stood up and said, I would like to impeach Li Mu. As the imperial censor of the palace, he used his position to suppress dissidents and abused his power. I would also like to impeach Li Mu. I would like to impeach Li Mu. I would like to. After the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, the Director of the Ministry of Rights, and the Deputy Director of the Zongjing Temple stood up, a few more officials stood up one after another. The target of their impeachment was also Li Mu. Without a doubt, this was a premeditated impeachment. These officials had already discussed this matter before going to court. Among these people, there were officials from the old party and also officials from the new party. Among them, officials from the Ministry of Rights made up the most. However, after these people stood up, they looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. According to their guesses, there were countless people in the court who wished for Li Mu's death. However, at this moment there were less than 10 people who stood up. This was far from the number they had expected. What were the other people in the court waiting for? Although the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights was also puzzled, there was indeed no one who stood up to impeach. According to the procedure, it was time for him to appear. He walked out with his ceremonial tablet and said, Your Majesty, the imperial censor was originally a clear stream in the court. The imperial censor of the palace, Li Mu, has many controversial actions and is no longer suitable to be the imperial censor. He did not impeach Li Mu. He just took the opportunity to raise a request that sounded reasonable. The imperial censor was an honest official. With so many officials impeaching Li Mu, it meant that he was no longer suitable to be the imperial censor. Moreover, the reasons for their impeachment were not groundless. In the past 3 days he had put in a lot of effort to impeach Li Mu. If Li Mu was not the imperial censor, he was just a lowly constable in the divine capital. A lowly constable could be easily transferred out of the divine capital for any reason. By then they would have the final say on how Li Mu would die. After the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights finished speaking, the court was very quiet. The important officials in front of him did not agree or disagree. Most of the other officials were also quiet. At this moment, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtains. "You want to impeach Li Mu?" The assistant director of the Ministry of Rights walked forward and said, "Your Majesty, we want Li Mu." At this moment, nearly 10 officials behind him, including the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, were stunned. Li Mu? Hadn't Li Mu fallen out of favor? Why was the Empress still addressing him so intimately? They dared to impeach Li Mu because Li Mu had fallen out of favor. If Li Mu had not fallen out of favor, then, they looked at each other, their hearts sinking into a bottomless abyss. Oh no, they had fallen into a trap. Chapter 299. The Empress's words of Minister Li caused the noisy court to fall into a temporary silence. Her Majesty rarely said the words, "beloved minister." She only addressed the ministers in the imperial court as ministers. How could she address a minister who had fallen out of favor as beloved minister? The only possibility was that Li Mu's falling out of favor was just an illusion. Other than those who stood out to impeach Li Mu, most of the officials in the court showed a look of understanding. Today's scene was within their expectations. This was a trap set up by the Empress and Li Mu together. His Majesty and Li Mu teamed up to act as bait in order to lure these people out, and they really took the bait. At this moment, Zhang Chun cleared his throat and stood out. He said, "Your Majesty, I have something to say." Mr. Mei looked at him and asked, "What do you have to say, Lord Zhang?" Zhang Chun pointed at the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue and said, "Lord Wei said that Constable Li spent time in the music hall during his patrol and neglected his duties. Then I would like to ask, in the case of Jianghu, who was not afraid of the Academy's pressure. As a constable, Constable Li patrolling brothels, music halls and restaurants is his duty. If it were not for the outlaws of Luoyang who often bullied the weak and humiliated the musicians, would Constable Li frequent these places?" Wei Ting opened his mouth and was speechless. He knew that Zhang Chun was not entirely right, but at this moment it was not important. The Empress Minister Li just now made him completely panic. As long as Li Mu did not fall out of favor, no matter what they did, it would be in vain. At this moment, Zhang Chun pointed at the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Rights and said, "You said that Li Mu accepted bribes when he was on duty. As everyone knows, Constable Li is not afraid of power and wholeheartedly serves the people. He has brought justice for many innocent people in Luoyang. The people respect him and love him. When he was patrolling the streets, they understood his hard work and served him tea to quench his thirst and a bowl of noodles to allay his hunger. This is the people's kindness to him. You call this accepting bribes?" He snorted and looked around at the people in the court. He said, "If this is called accepting bribes, then I hope that all of my colleagues in the court today can make the people willingly accept bribes. Touch your conscience. Can you?" The Minister-Counselor opened his mouth but could not refute. He knew what Zhang Chun said better than anyone else, but so what? His Majesty doted on Li Mu, so the people gave him these gifts to show their love and respect for him. Li Mu had lost the favor of the emperor, and the commoners had given him these gifts. He had accepted bribes. This was the court. They guessed that Li Mu had lost the emperor's favor. That was why they dared to stand up today and use this as a reason to impeach Li Mu. But judging from the situation in front of them, they seemed to have guessed wrong. One wrong step and the whole game was lost. In the end, Zhang Chun pointed at the senior minister of Taichung Temple and said, "You said that His Excellency Li took advantage of his position to attack dissidents. What is dissident and what is self? His Excellency Li has a noble character and has never formed cliques for personal gain. On the contrary, you all consider yourselves as the new and old cliques. The crime of disrespect in front of the palace was set by the late emperor. His Excellency Li respected the late emperor and carried out the law set by the late emperor, so he punished you. How dare you?" The minister Taichung Temple's face turned red. "You are slandering me." Many people in the court looked at Zhang Chun with disdain. There were indeed people in the court who respected the late emperor, but Li Mu was definitely not one of them. Li Mu's passion in the past few months was to overthrow the late emperor's old system. Who in the court did not know that? Zhang Chun, Li Mu's dog, was really shameless to protect his master. But no matter what, his words were watertight and no one could refute. Moreover, the situation in the court was not clear yet. No one was willing to stand up and refute. Whether Li Mu was guilty or not depended on whether the Empress was willing to protect him. If the Empress was willing to protect him, he would be innocent even if he was guilty. If the Empress was not willing to protect him, he would be guilty even if he was innocent. At this time, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtain again. A few days ago, Minister Li was maliciously framed. Did the Ministry of Justice find out who was behind it? Everyone in the court was shocked when they heard this. This happened in the last morning court. The Empress did not say anything about it last time. But today she suddenly mentioned it. The meaning behind it was self-evident. The Assistant Minister of Right's eyelids twitched. He could not help but lower his head. Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "Your Majesty, the culprit disguised himself as Lord Li and committed the crime." After that, he disappeared. The Ministry of Justice has not found any clues. If we wait for the Ministry of Justice to find clues, how long will Minister Li be wronged? The Empress looked at him and said coldly, "Mei Wei, bring him here." Mr. Mei looked outside the hall and said, "Bring him here." Two women escorted a middle-aged man into the hall. When he saw the middle-aged man, the Assistant Minister of Rights finally could not control his expression. After the deed was done, he had ordered this person to leave Luoyang and never come back. He did not expect to see him in the court. Mr. Mei looked coldly at the middle-aged man and said, "Speak. Who ordered you to frame Lord Li?" When he said this, the officials were shocked again. They did not expect the Empress to have already captured the culprit. This person used fulu or pills to disguise himself as Li Mu. Even the Ministry of Justice would not be able to find him. The internal guards would not be able to find him. The Empress must have done it herself. The power of a transcendent powerhouse was beyond their imagination. Of course, more importantly, the Empress had done it herself for Li Mu. This was enough to prove one thing. The middle-aged man knelt on the ground and pointed at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. He said, "It was Lord Qin. It was Lord Qin who gave me the fake form pill and told me to pretend to be Lord Li and rape that woman to frame him." Nonsense! The Assistant Minister of Rights' face was pale. He pointed at him with a trembling finger and said, "I have no grudge against you. Why did you frame me?" The middle-aged man shook his head helplessly and said, "Lord Qin, it's useless. They all know." "Just admit it," the Assistant Minister of Rights said sternly. "What nonsense are you talking about? I don't even know you." Although his voice was not soft, everyone present could hear the trembling in his voice. Clearly he was not confident. They all realized something. They did not expect the Assistant Minister of Rights to be the one who would frame Li Mu like this. When they thought about it more carefully, the Assistant Minister of Rights' wife was Zhou Chu's sister. Zhou Chu had died at Li Mu's hands. He had enough motive to frame Li Mu. The middle-aged man waved his hand and images appeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the image, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights handed a pill to the middle-aged man and seemed to whisper a few words into his ear. If this middle-aged man was the adulterer who framed Li Mu, then it went without saying who the real mastermind behind this was. Seeing these images, the Assistant Minister of Rights trembled and fell to the ground powerlessly. At this moment, no explanation would be of any use. With witnesses and evidence present, they could perform a soul search on him. At that time, no matter what secrets he had in his heart, he would not be able to hide them. In the end, this matter was still due to his negligence. His negligence was that he did not kill this person and completely destroy the evidence after the deed was done. His negligence was that he was too anxious and believed the Dowager Consort's words. He thought that Li Mu had fallen out of favor with his wife, which was why he dared to act so recklessly. Now that things had come to this, there was no use regretting it. He hung his head and sat on the ground, not saying a word. Clearly he had accepted his fate. The Assistant Minister of Rights' actions had completely confirmed his crimes. He was even spared from unnecessary interrogation. At this moment, the Crepe Myrtle Palace was completely silent. Everyone's hearts were extremely heavy because the entire palace was enveloped by a powerful aura. This aura came from the curtain in front of them. Under this aura, even the 5th and 6th level courtiers felt as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. It was obvious that Her Majesty was extremely angry. First you secretly framed him. Then you joined forces with the imperial court to impeach him. You said that Minister Li was suppressing his dissidents. Who exactly was the one doing so? Hiring a murderer to frame a colleague. The Assistant Minister of Rights will be removed from his position and sent to the border counties. The Ministry of Justice will investigate this case strictly. Do not leave out anyone who participated in this case. The Assistant Minister of Rights, the Minister Assistant Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Taichung Temple, and the others formed a clique for personal gain and attacked dissidents. They will be removed from their positions immediately and will never be employed again. All those related to this case will be severely punished. In the imperial court, the Empress was furious. She dismissed all the officials who had impeached Li Mu today. Ever since she ascended the throne, the courtiers had never seen her so angry. The Assistant Minister of Rights and the others were just ordinary impeachments. Even if the reason for the impeachment was wrong, the consequences would not be so severe. Impeachment was an impeachment based on hearsay. Afterward, there would naturally be internal guards or imperial censors to verify the truth. Every official in the imperial court had the power to impeach. However, they had chosen the wrong time. The Assistant Minister of Rights had hired a murderer to frame a colleague in the imperial court. This was something that the imperial court could not tolerate. There were disagreements and conflicts between courtiers. This was normal. However, there must be a bottom line in any conflict. The Assistant Minister of Rights' actions had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court and the bottom line of the law. The Assistant Minister of Rights, the Minister Assistant Minister of Revenue, and the others happened to be implicated by him. What should have been a normal impeachment became a conspiracy. In the end, not only did they lose their official positions, but they also had to face prosecution. This was obviously a test by Her Majesty. While testing the courtiers, she also caught all the courtiers who were tempted to take action against Li Mu in one fell swoop. She was using this method to protect her favored courtiers. She was also using the fate of these people as a warning to others. After today, everyone would know that Li Mu was the Empress's man. If they tried to slander or frame him through clumsy means, they would eventually pay with their lives. Chapter 300. The Minister of Rights, the Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Taichung Temple, and the others stood in the main hall. The Empress's voice was still echoing in their ears. It was not easy for them to enter the 4 great academies. After leaving the academies, they had to wait for a long time before they could fill a vacancy. They had also worked hard in the bureaucracy for many years before they could reach their current positions. Decades of hard work had turned into bubbles in a single day. They should have known that Li Mu was as cunning as a fox. How could he suddenly fall out of favor? This was all a trap set by him. There were so many officials in the court, but only a few of them took the bait. After the morning assembly, the Minister of Rights was taken away by the Ministry of Justice. No one knew how many people were involved behind him. The other 9 officials were also demoted, especially the Ministry of Rights. Under the Minister of Rights, half of the important officials were gone. The imperial examination was imminent, and the court had to fill the vacancy in the Ministry of Rights. The imperial examination could not be delayed. As usual, this matter was nominated by the Hall of Secretaries. The position of Minister of Rights was very important. It needed an experienced official. However, there were not many rank 4 officials in the court. Every one of them held an important position. It was not possible to transfer officials of the same rank to the Ministry of Rights. If they were transferred back and forth, there would be a vacancy that could not be filled. It would cause chaos in the other departments. After thinking about it, Liu Yi came to the Ministry of Rights to seek the opinion of the Minister of Rights. The Minister of Rights was also worried about this matter. The imperial examination was imminent, and the Ministry of Rights did not have enough manpower. After this incident, more than half of the officials in the Ministry of Rights were gone. Even the Minister of Rights was dismissed. He urgently needed an assistant. He thought about it but could not think of a suitable candidate. In the end he said, "Why don't we let Minister Liu take over?" Although he has not been in the Ministry of Rights for long, he is familiar with the affairs of the ministry. He can take on this responsibility. Liu Yi had some impression of Minister Liu. He said, "Minister Liu has just been transferred and he is going to be the Minister of Rights. Isn't this promotion speed a bit too fast?" If he had someone he could use, the Minister of Rights wouldn't be forced to do something beyond his ability. He shook his head and said, "Dr. Liu was transferred here on a regular basis. It can't be considered a promotion. His experience is not shallow. Although he is still somewhat lacking as an assistant minister, there is no other way at the moment. The imperial examinations are important. If it is delayed, none of us can bear the responsibility." According to Great Zhou's usual practice, the officials of the various ministries were rarely transferred outside. The position of assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights was usually taken over by a doctor. However, the doctor often had to work hard for 10 years or even longer before he could become an assistant minister. This Dr. Liu had just been transferred not long ago, but he had already made an exception and was promoted. This was very rare in the officialdom. But who asked the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights to seek his own death? Of all the people he could have touched, he just had to touch Li Mu. This move was not a big deal, and Li Mu did not suffer any losses. More than half of the Ministry of Rights was lost by him. If the vacancy in the Ministry of Rights was not resolved as soon as possible, the imperial examinations would definitely be affected. After thinking for a long time, Liu Yi nodded and said, "Since the minister recommends Dr. Liu, the Secretariat will nominate him, Ministry of Justice." Inside the prison of the Ministry of Justice, the Assistant Minister of Rights, who had been in high spirits during the morning court session, was now a prisoner. He sat dejectedly in a corner with a lonely expression. Zhou Zhong walked to the door of the prison and said, "Open the door." The jailer hurriedly opened the door and Zhou Zhong slowly walked in. He walked in front of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights and said, "His Majesty has ordered that the people involved in this case be severely punished. Lord Qin and that Li Mu have no enmity. Who is behind this?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "Zhou Zhong is my wife's younger brother. He died because of Li Mu. I just want to avenge him. There is no one behind this." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "You are the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. You have a high position. After the imperial examinations were reformed, you have even more power. Zhou Zhong is your wife's younger brother, not your biological brother. You have no reason to do this." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "I am responsible for what I did. Don't waste your breath." Zhou Zhong smiled and said, "Actually, even if you don't say it, I know. On the day Li Mu was imprisoned, your wife and mother-in-law came to the Ministry of Justice. If there is anyone in Shindu who hates Li Mu the most, it would be your mother-in-law. Her son died at the hands of Li Mu. It is reasonable that she wants to kill Li Mu for revenge." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights looked at him and said, "Lord Zhou, you should know better than me that some things require evidence." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "I know what you are waiting for. You are waiting for the Zhou family to protect you. However, have you ever thought about why no one from the new party stood up for you in the imperial court today?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights' expression froze. This was something he could not understand even now. Zhou Zhong continued, "They already knew that this was Her Majesty and Li Mu's scheme, but they did not tell you. It is obvious that they have given up on you. You hired assassins to frame your colleagues and touched Her Majesty's bottom line. The Zhou family cannot protect you and they have no way to do so. Regardless of whether you give them up or not, you will be sent to the battlefield at the border. With your cultivation, you will become a dead soul at the hands of those demon kings and ghost kings in less than a month. No, they will devour your body and soul. They will not give you the chance to become a dead soul." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights thought carefully and his face gradually paled. Zhou Zhong looked at him and said, "When the late emperor was still alive, Her Majesty was already chosen as the crown prince's wife. At that time, the Zhou family's goal of stealing the country had not been exposed. The late emperor treated the Zhou family very well and gave them 2 death exemption tokens. Now that you have been sentenced to exile, it is no different from a death sentence. If the Zhou family is willing to save you, although they cannot restore your position, they can let you stay in the divine capital and keep your life. If the Zhou family is not willing to save you, then you can only wait for death." Zhou Zhong looked at him one last time and turned to leave. 15 minutes later, a woman came to visit him in the prison. When the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights saw the woman, he immediately got up and ran to the door of the prison. He shouted, "Wife, wife, save me!" The woman's expression was ugly. She asked, "How did this get exposed?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "It must be Her Majesty's divination. Li Mu's fall from grace was fake. We were all fooled by them." The woman gritted her teeth and said, "We are her family. She actually treated us like this for an outsider." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights quickly said, "It's too late to say this now. Wife, you have to think of a way to save me. I heard that the Zhou family has 2 death exemption tokens. As long as I have one, I won't be exiled to the border counties." The woman nodded and said, "I will go and beg father. Wait for me here. Zhou Manor." Zhou Ting had just finished his seclusion. When he heard about the recent events, he was furious. "Stupid. The woman who had returned to the Zhou family said with a cold face, "Stupid or smart, I have to avenge Chu. He is a piece of flesh that fell from my body. I will not let him die in vain," Zhou Ting said with a sullen face. "Because of your stupidity, we lost an assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Do you know how important that position is?" The woman said coldly, "I don't know and I don't want to know. I only know that I have to avenge Chu." Zhou Qian looked at her father and said, "Father, you have to save my husband. If he is exiled to the border counties, what will happen to me? What will happen to our child?" Zhou Ting said indifferently, "This matter is already known by the entire court. His Majesty has personally issued a decree. How can I save him?" Zhou Qian said, "Doesn't our family have a death exemption token? As long as we use the death exemption token, we can exempt him from the crime of being exiled, right?" Zhou Ting glanced at her and asked, "Who told you that?" Zhou Qian did not answer directly. She said, "Father, I beg you. Save my husband." Zhou Ting was expressionless. The Zhou family did have a death exemption token, and there were two of them. They were both bestowed by the previous emperor. The Zhou family had seized the emperor's aura and destroyed the continuation of the Shao royal family. If they were to use their death exemption token, it would probably enrage the old faction of the Shao royal family. Moreover, the minister of the Ministry of Rights was already a useless person. There was no need to waste a token to save him. Even if he agreed, his eldest brother and the rest would not. Zhou Ting said, "The Zhou family does not have a death exemption token. We cannot save him." Zhou Qian complained tearfully, "Father, are you so heartless? Are you going to watch your daughter lose her husband and your grandson lose his father?" Zhou Ting thought for a moment. He looked at her and said, "There are many talents in the fairies' capital. After separating from him, I will choose another young talent for you. No matter what, he will be several times stronger than him." Zhou Qian looked at her father. Her crying gradually stopped. An hour later, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Qian stood outside the cell and said to the minister of the Ministry of Rights, "I have asked. The Zhou family does not have a death exemption token. Father cannot save you. Don't worry. After you go to the border counties, I will take good care of the child. Do not involve more people in this matter." Zhou Qian did not stay for long. She left in a hurry. The minister of the Ministry of Rights leaned against the cell door and slid down weakly. After an unknown period of time, a sigh came from behind him. He turned his head and looked at Zhou Zhong, who was standing in the shadows. He asked, "What are you sighing about?" Zhou Zhong looked at him and said slowly, "I feel bad for you. You are doing well as the minister of the Ministry of Rights. You have no enmity with Li Mu. But because of someone else you got into trouble. Your efforts in the first half of your life have been wasted. You do not have long to live. And the person who caused you to fall to this state is not even willing to save you. I believe you know very well that the Zhou family has a death exemption token. It is just that they are not willing to save you." The minister of the Ministry of Rights looked at him with a cold smile and said, "Don't you want me to give up more people? I am afraid you will be disappointed. This matter was done by me alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else." Zhou Zhong looked at him and said with a faint smile, "Have you ever thought about what you will be like after you die?" He looked at the minister of the Ministry of Rights. His eyes were like deep pools. His voice carried a strange power as he slowly said, "Your wife, although no longer young, is still in the prime of her life. After you die, she will still have a long life. She will definitely remarry. At that time, she will take in an even younger and more handsome husband than you. In the future, they will have their own children. That person will live in your mansion, sleep with your woman, and if he is not happy, he might even beat up your children." Zhou Zhong looked into his eyes. His gaze was deep as he said slowly, "They treated you like this. Is it worth it for you to protect them like this?" Zhou Zhong's voice seemed to have a magical power. When the minister of the Ministry of Rights heard this, a trace of confusion appeared on his face. Then his chest began to rise and fall slightly. His breathing became rapid, the veins on his forehead bulged, and his eyes became bloodshot. "I didn't want to interfere, but that old woman forced me to do so. That false form elixir was given to me by her, but she didn't save me. What right does she have to not save me? Since she doesn't want me to live, then let her die with me." Translator's note: Lu_Kaixin translator, Kaixin editor, Valvrave 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 editor, Valvrave. Chapter 301. Ministry of Justice. When Zhou Zhong walked out of the prison, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, who was waiting outside, whispered into his ear, "Lord Qin from the Ministry of Personnel is here." The Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Justice were the pillars of the old party in the imperial court. Zhou Zhong walked into the yamen and saw a figure standing there. He asked, "Lord Qin, are you here for something important?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel turned around and looked at Zhou Zhong. He asked, "The higher-ups say that the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights must be punished severely. This is a big blow to the Zhou family and the new party. We can't let go of this opportunity." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "Just the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights is not enough." The assistant minister's eyes flashed. He asked, "Lord Zhou, you mean?" Zhou Zhong said, "The source of this matter is Zhou Ting's wife, not the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. If we can drag her down, the Zhou family will protect her for the sake of their reputation or for other reasons. My goal is the Zhou family's 2 death exemption medallions. Without them, it will be much easier for us to fight the Zhou family in the future." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel nodded. The late emperor's death exemption medallions were actually given to a thief who stole the country. It is indeed a disgrace to us. It would be best if we can make them use the medallions. However, I don't think the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights will rat out his mother-in-law. The Zhou family will not use the medallions for a mere assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Zhou Zhong looked at him and asked, "Does Lord Qin not believe me?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was stunned. He asked, "Could it be?" Zhou Zhong said, "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights has already confessed that it was his mother-in-law, Zhou Ting's wife, who instigated him to frame Li Mu. She is the mastermind behind the scenes. This time I will make the Zhou family pay the price." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was shocked. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights actually ratted her out. Then he came to his senses and praised, "Lord Zhou is always full of surprises. If we can make the Zhou family hand over the 2 death exemption medallions, Lord Zhou will have done a great service." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "This is what I should do in order to support the legal wife." An uninvited guest arrived at the entrance of Zhou residence. The assistant minister of justice, Zhou Zhong, also had the surname Zhou, but he was different from the Zhou family. When he was in the imperial court, he sided with the old party. Over the years, the officials of the new party had suffered many losses in his hands. Zhou Zhong came to the Zhou clan alone. Even though there were no officials from the Ministry of Justice following him, the first Missy's husband was still in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Nothing good could come from Zhou Zhong's visit to the Zhou clan at this moment. Even so, the Zhou clan's gatekeeper did not dare to slight him. After inviting him into the Zhou clan's residence, he went to report it as quickly as possible. Zhou Zhong sat in the front hall, sipping his tea. After a while, someone stepped into the hall. Censor Zhou Xiong walked to the main seat and sat down. Only then did he look at Zhou Zhong and ask, "Assistant Minister Zhou, what business do you have with my Zhou residence?" Zhou Zhong put down his teacup and said, "I'm here on official business, so I won't beat around the bush." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights hired assassins to frame an important official of the court. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Zhou Xiong. "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights has committed a serious crime. The Ministry of Justice will punish him accordingly. The Zhou clan will abide by the law and will not interfere." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "That's good. In that case, I'll have to trouble Censor Zhou to invite Madame Zhou out so that I can bring her back to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation." Zhou Xiong's expression changed when he heard this. He forced himself to calm down and glared at Zhou Zhong. He asked, "What does the case of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights have to do with Madame Zhou? She's the wife of the court. How can you interrogate her just because you want to?" Zhou Zhong's expression was calm as he said slowly, "His Majesty has decreed that the Ministry of Justice will handle the case of Lord Li being framed. Anyone involved in the case, regardless of identity or status, will be punished severely. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights has already confessed that Madame Zhou is the mastermind behind the case of Lord Li. If the Zhou clan does not hand her over, it will be considered as defying the decree. Is the Zhou clan going to defy the decree?" The veins on Zhou Xiong's forehead throbbed. He quickly regained his composure and said, "Assistant Minister, please don't cross the line." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "If I didn't cross the line, the person who came to the Zhou residence today would be the constable of the Ministry of Justice." Zhou Zhong's words were very clear. As the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, He did not have to arrest criminals personally. However, he had shown enough respect to the Zhou clan by coming here alone. If the Zhou clan still insisted on being stubborn, they would be asking for it. This also meant that the Ministry of Justice was determined to take Madame Zhou. There was no room for negotiation. Even though Zhou Xiong wanted to kill the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, he had to admit that this matter had blown up. After he calmed down, he looked at Zhou Zhong and said, "Sir Zhou, please go back first. I'll personally go to the Ministry of Justice to deal with this matter in 2 hours." Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "I'll be waiting at the Ministry of Justice." A moment later, in a courtyard of the Zhou residence, a woman grabbed her messy hair and gritted her teeth as she yelled, "Bastard, bastard. I didn't agree to Chanshan marrying him back then, but you insisted. Do you see his face now?" Zhou Ting slapped her face and said angrily, "Shut up. If it wasn't for you, things wouldn't have turned out this way." The woman covered her face. After being stunned for a moment, she completely exploded. She grabbed Zhou Ting's neck and said crazily, "How dare you hit me? How dare you hit me?" Zhou Ting knocked her out with a slap and ordered the maids in the courtyard, "Take Madame back to her room to rest. Without my orders, don't let her out of her room." The 2 maids helped the woman back to her room. Zhou Xiong looked at Zhou Ting and asked, "Fourth brother about this?" Zhou Ting closed his eyes and said, "Go and ask Big Brother. No matter what Big Brother decides, I'll agree." Zhou Xiong walked out of the courtyard and crushed a jade talisman. Soon, a figure suddenly appeared in the courtyard. It was the minister Zhou Jing. Zhou Xiong walked forward and said, "Big Brother, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights at the Ministry of Justice sold out sister-in-law. Earlier, Zhou Zhong came to the residence to ask for her. I told him to go back and wait. How should we deal with this matter?" Zhou Jing's eyelids drooped slightly. He said, "As expected, the old party won't let go of this opportunity." Zhou Xiong sighed and said, "We have to answer to the Ministry of Justice. We can't really hand sister-in-law over." Zhou Jing said, "I'm afraid they don't want her." Zhou Xiong was stunned for a moment. He quickly reacted and asked, "Big Brother, are you saying that their goal is the Zhou family's death exemption medallion?" Zhou Jing extended his hand. There was a flash of golden light and 2 medallions appeared. He handed the medallions to Zhou Xiong and said, "Send these 2 medallions to the Ministry of Justice." Zhou Xiong took the medallions and said doubtfully, "2?" Zhou Jing said, "Either send them 2 or none. Sister-in-law is a member of the Zhou family. Isn't Qian'er's husband one too?" The death exemption medallion was too important. Zhou Xiong was reluctant to part with it and did not understand. After Zhou Jing's reminder, he quickly understood the matter. They could either save both of them or not save both of them. The Zhou family only had these 2 choices. As for saving one and giving up the other as one of the 9 families of the Great Zhou, the Zhou family would be ridiculed if they did such a thing. The Zhou family could not afford to lose face. To them, they could lose benefits, but they could not afford to lose face. He kept the medallion inside. He left the Zhou family and headed to the Ministry of Justice. A moment later, at the Ministry of Justice's assistant minister's office, Zhou Xiong slammed a medallion on the table and asked Zhou Zhong, "The death exemption medallion is here. Can I take the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights away?" Zhou Zhong picked up the medallion and looked at it. He said, "The late emperor gave you the death exemption medallion. It can even exempt you from the death penalty. Men, take Lord Zhou to the prison and release the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights." Zhou Xiong turned to leave. Zhou Zhong said, "Wait." Zhou Xiong's eyelids twitched. He asked, "Is there anything else?" Zhou Zhong said, "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights can be exonerated. However, in this case, Madame Zhou is the mastermind. If the Zhou family does not send her to the Ministry of Justice by today, I will send someone to take her away." Smack. Zhou Xiong took out another death exemption medallion and slammed it on the table. He said, "Is this okay now?" Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "Please go ahead." Zhou Xiong snorted and turned to leave. Not long after, he walked out of the Ministry of Justice with the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. He looked at him angrily and said, "Remember, the Zhou family wasted a death exemption medallion for you. Treat Chanshan better in the future. Don't be ungrateful." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights nodded. Zhou Xiong, who had already turned around, did not notice that there was no gratitude in his eyes. There was only hatred. This matter had nothing to do with him, but in the end he was implicated and almost lost his life. First, the Zhou family gave up on him. Now they made such a face. Who were they trying to impress? Ministry of Justice. In the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong flipped open a book on the table. He flipped to a certain page, picked up a pen and gently crossed off the two Zhou family on the list. Then he closed the book and said slowly, "There are 7 more." Li Mu walked on the streets. The people of Fairy's capital greeted him warmly. "Hello, Constable Li. Constable Li, you're still single? My daughter is also of age." "Constable Li, do you want to consider my daughter?" "Constable Li, I have 2 daughters. One is prettier than the other." "Constable Li, don't go." Li Mu could not resist the people's enthusiasm. He did not even bother to collect his telekinesis and fled. The case was cleared. It was very thorough. The people even knew the details of the case. Now, all the people of Fairy's capital knew that he was a virgin. Along the way there were countless people who wanted to marry their daughters to Li Mu. Although Li Mu usually got along well with them, he did not have any thoughts about their daughters. It was all Zhou Zhong's fault. Because of this, he became famous in Fairy's capital again. Sooner or later, Li Mu would find him and settle the score. When he finally reached his house, he saw a few carriages parked at the entrance. Beside the carriages, Mr. Mei was instructing a few people to move the things inside. Li Mu walked over and asked, "What's all this for?" Lord Mei smiled and said, "This is His Majesty's reward to you. There are precious fabrics, rare flowers, and some rare items that were offered as tributes from various places. Later, His Majesty will have people rearrange the array formation in your residence." The carriages were parked in a row outside Li Mu's residence. If not for Mr. Mei's explanation, Li Mu would have thought that the Empress was moving into his house. He really didn't expect that Li Si would be right about this. Li Si said that the Empress would warm up to him again after a short period of coldness. Looking at the boxes of rewards, Li Mu even suspected that the Empress was trying to flirt with him. Li Mu did not know whether she had met her inner demons or not, but it was true that she was inexplicably cold and hot to him. Li Si had said that this was a routine between men and women. Only by being both hot and cold, and being neither friendly nor distant could they arouse the other party's nervousness and sense of danger. Now that Li Mu thought about it, during that period of time when he had been ignored, he had indeed been worried about his gains and losses. He had not been able to eat or sleep well, and his mind had been filled with thoughts of the Empress. But thinking about it carefully, it was impossible for the Empress to know such a sophisticated trick. Her EQ was not much better than Xiao Bai's. How could she come up with such a sophisticated trick? He shook his head, threw this bold and unrealistic thought out of his mind, and walked into the residence. The Empress had rewarded many things. Li Mu planned to pick some and send them to Zhang Chun. Old Zhang's protection of him in the imperial court was no less than Li Mu's protection of the Empress. Li Mu was very touched by this. He specially asked the Empress to reward Zhang Chun with a 3-sectioned residence. It was located in the North Court, not far from the Li residence. Although they were not neighbors, it was just a matter of walking a few steps. At this time, in a residence not far from the Li residence in the North Court, Zhang Chun stood at the door and ordered 2 palace guards. He said, move slowly. Don't break the things." Today he finally fulfilled his wish of moving to a new residence. Although the residence was only changed from a 2-sectioned one to a 3-sectioned one, the location was worlds apart. This was the North Court, where the real high-ranking officials and dignitaries lived. If he lived here, he would not be embarrassed to say that he was an official in the imperial court. Zhang Chun pulled Madame Zhang around the new residence and asked, "How is it?" Madame Zhang said, "It's big enough, but the furniture is a bit old. Why don't we order some new ones?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "There's no need to waste money. It won't be too late to change after a few days when we get a bigger residence." Madame Zhang was shocked. She said, "This is already big enough. You want a bigger one?" Zhang Chun nodded firmly and said, 3-sectioned is nothing. At this rate, it's not impossible for us to get a 5-section one. You can just wait to enjoy your life. Tidy up the room first. When you're done, I'll take you to Lord Li's residence for a walk." Madame Zhang sighed and said, "I knew that Constable Li had a bright future. I asked you to set him up with Yi, but you were unwilling. Now there are so many girls in the Immortals' capital who want to marry him." "Shoo." Zhang Chun covered her mouth and said, "Didn't I tell you not to mention this in the future? You must remember this. Otherwise there won't even be a 2-sectioned or 3-sectioned residence, let alone a 5-sectioned one. You don't want us to bring our daughter back to the small courtyard of the Yamen, do you?" Chapter 302. The case of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights being instigated by his mother-in-law to frame his colleague had attracted widespread attention, both among the people and in the imperial court. Everyone's attention was on the Ministry of Justice as they paid close attention to the progress of this matter. Using despicable means to frame a colleague had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court. According to the law, both the Zhou family's wife and the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights would be severely punished. However, in the end, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights was only demoted from his position, while the fourth wife of the Zhou family only lost her status as a madam. This was because the Zhou family had taken out the 2 death exemption tokens bestowed by the late emperor. Although it was a bit wasteful to use death exemption tokens to absolve the crime, they had no choice but to do so. According to the law, as the mastermind, the fourth wife of the Zhou family would not only be stripped of her status as a madam, but she would also be demoted to a lowly status. If the Ministry of Justice was more ruthless, it would not be impossible for her to be classified as an official prostitute. The Zhou family was now considered a royal family. If the Zhou family's wife became an official prostitute, the Zhou family's face would be trampled on. The Zhou family would also become the laughingstock of the entire divine capital. The Zhou family had used the death exemption tokens to absolve the 2 of their crimes. However, the old party, especially the Shao royal family, did not feel good about it. The Zhou family had seized the late emperor's empire, and now they had to use the death exemption tokens bestowed by the late emperor to absolve the Zhou family of their crimes. To the Shao family, this was more disgusting than swallowing 100 flies. Fortunately, these 2 tokens would not appear in the future. Sooner or later they would be disgusted. It was better to be disgusted sooner rather than later. A grand banquet was being held in a luxurious mansion in the southern court. At the banquet, everyone from the old party gathered. Apart from the officials of the imperial court, there were also many members of the Shao royal family. The table was filled with delicacies. Everyone toasted and laughed. The Ministry of Justice's Zhou Zhong was undoubtedly the main character of this banquet. His position in the old party was extremely high. This time he had made the Zhou family suffer such a huge loss and made a great contribution to the old party. The Zhou family scoundrels tried their best to curry favor with the late emperor when he was still alive and obtained 2 death exemption tokens from the late emperor. Every time I think of this in the past few years, it feels like a fishbone is stuck in my throat. Now that I've finally spat out this fishbone, it feels great. This is simply satisfying. The Zhou family's 2 death exemption tokens are gone. We have one less worry. Lord Zhou, let me toast to you. Lord Zhou, let me toast to you. Zhou Zhong was the main character of today's banquet. Even the original members of the royal family of the Shao clan gave him enough respect. This also made the other officials present envious. Zhou Zhong held a high position, had the ability and the means, and was also highly regarded by the Shao clan. After today he would probably come into contact with even more secrets of the royal family. His future was limitless, and definitely would not be limited to the position of assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. Once the Shao clan regained power, his position in the court would be even higher than it was now. Imperial Palace in front of Jianghu Palace. A palace maid on duty was on duty. A few figures came from afar and stopped beside her. She looked up and immediately bowed. "Greetings, Commander Mei." Mr. Mei glanced at her and said, "Take her away. Slap her 100 times and flog her 20 times. Send her to Fusho Palace." The palace maid seemed to realize something. Her face paled and her body trembled uncontrollably. Mr. Mei asked calmly, "Do you know why I punished you?" The palace maid knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Commander Mei, I know I was wrong. I know I was wrong." Mr. Mei glanced at her one last time and said, "As a servant in the palace, you have to abide by the palace rules. Don't listen to what you shouldn't hear and don't say what you shouldn't say. Take her away and flog her outside Fusho Palace." Fusho Palace. Fusho Palace was located in the West Palace. It was originally the residence of the imperial concubines. The current empress didn't have any imperial concubines, and she didn't drive the former emperor's imperial concubines out of the West Palace. Fusho Palace was the residence of the old Empress Dowager. In the West Palace, the Empress Dowager was the leader, followed by the old Empress Dowager. Since the death of the former emperor, the old Empress Dowager had basically been in a state of seclusion. The West Palace was usually very quiet. Today, the silence of the West Palace was broken by a series of screams. A palace maid was escorted to the entrance of Fusho Palace by 2 internal guards. First she was slapped 100 times. Then she was pressed to the ground and flogged 20 times. Her miserable screams could be heard clearly in the West Palace. The West Palace was a quiet place. The internal guards didn't have the guts to do this. It must be the Empress' order. The palace maid was not tortured in the Empress Dowager's everlasting palace, nor in front of the other old Empress Dowager's palaces. It couldn't be a coincidence that she chose the old Empress Dowager's Fusho Palace. It must be that the old Empress Dowager did something that displeased the Empress Dowager and touched the Empress Dowager's reverse scale. That was why she changed her respect for the old Empress Dowager and didn't give the old Empress Dowager any face. This was an obvious warning. In Fusho Palace, an old palace maid was angry. She said loudly, "There are so many places in the palace, but she chose to do it in front of our palace. Isn't this a show for the old Empress Dowager to see?" The old Empress Dowager sighed and said, "Yes, this is her warning to me. I didn't expect her to be so protective of that person. I was negligent." Not long after, a palace maid came in and said, "Old Empress Dowager, that palace maid fainted. Should we send her out of the West Palace?" The old Empress Dowager shook her head and said, "No matter what, she is still one of my people. Bring her into the palace and let her work in Fusho Palace." Then she looked at the old palace maid and asked, "How is Yunyang?" The old palace maid sighed and said, "The prince consort's accident was a big blow to the princess. She locked herself in the princess residence all day and didn't see anyone." The imperial concubine said, "No one would have thought that the one surnamed Chui was actually a spy from the devil sect. Go to the princess mansion and say that it was Aijia's order to let her come to Fusho Palace and stay with Aijia for a few days." Princess Yunyang's residence. After Chui Ming's identity as a spy was exposed and he escaped from Luoyang, Princess Yunyang locked herself in the residence. She didn't see anyone except for her personal maid who brought her food every day. At this time in Princess Yunyang's room, she looked at a woman who suddenly appeared and asked in shock, "Who are you?" The woman smiled at her and said, "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that I am here to help you." Princess Yunyang said warily, "Leave quickly or I will shout for help." The woman shook her head and said, "Go ahead. I have sealed this place with an array. Even if you shout until your throat breaks, no one will hear you." Princess Yunyang said with a pale face, "What do you want?" The woman looked at her and said slowly, "Didn't I say that I am here to help you? Do you want to see the prince consort again? Do you want to sit on the highest position?" The woman's voice was bewitching. Princess Yunyang asked blankly, "What is the highest position?" The woman said, "Of course it is the supreme position. The position of the emperor." Princess Yunyang was shocked and said, "How is that possible?" The woman smiled and said, "If other women can sit there, why can't you? Don't forget that you have the blood of the Shao royal family and are the daughter of the late emperor. You are more suitable to sit on that position than her." In the room, Princess Yunyang pondered over her words and the wariness on her face gradually disappeared. Li residence. Li Mu already knew that the Zhou clan had used 2 death exemption gold medallions to save the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights and Zhou Chu's mother. He did not expect that the Zhou clan would have death exemption gold medallions. Although the 2 culprits were not severely punished by the law, it was not like they did not gain anything. Things like death exemption gold medallions should not exist in the first place. Using them meant one less piece. After he was done with this, Li Mu would find a way to destroy them sooner or later. But right now he had more important things to do. The imperial examination was just around the corner. Even if he wrote the outline, the examination questions were set by the various ministries. He had to prepare. If he failed, not only would he lose face, he would also lose face for the empress. In addition, Chui Ming's matter had a great impact on the imperial court. The most direct impact was that the officials in the imperial court thought that everyone was a spy from the demon sect, especially those who were good-looking. They were especially suspected. After all, even the emperor's son-in-law, a 4th-rank official, had been infiltrated by the demon sect. They had set up a trap on Chui Ming for 20 years. Who knew if they had infiltrated other places? But for this kind of thing, besides soul-searching, it was almost impossible to find out the other party's identity after the spy was exposed. The imperial court was now in a state of panic. It made the officials panic and was not conducive to the stability of the situation. Li Mu had to advise the empress to stop investigating the demon sect spies. Historical experience showed that this kind of heavy pressure was very disadvantageous to stability. In addition to what had just happened, many officials of the old and new parties were directly dismissed. There was already some turmoil in the imperial court. The imperial court could not be allowed to continue to be chaotic. The director of the Ministry of Rights, the vice director of the Ministry of Revenue, and the deputy minister of the Taichung Temple were dismissed. Those empty important positions were quickly filled. Many officials were promoted, and their original positions were left empty. It was just right to fill them after the imperial examination. The biggest winner of this framing storm was not Li Mu, but someone else. The assistant director of the Ministry of Rights had ruined his own future. His position was replaced by another director of the Ministry of Rights. This director Liu did not go along with the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights and participate in the impeachment of Li Mu. It just so happened that the Ministry of Rights was seriously short of people this time. He took advantage of this matter and rose up the ranks. From a director to an assistant director, he took the step and saved at least 10 years of suffering. He was probably the biggest winner of this matter. Chengdu, a mansion in the North Courtyard. The new assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, Lu Qing, opened the door. Two children playing in the courtyard threw away their toys and ran over quickly. They opened their arms and said happily, "Daddy is back." Lu Qing picked up the two children, a boy and a girl, and played with them for a while. Then he put them down and said, "You two play by yourselves. Daddy is busy with official business." Because of the imperial examination, the officials of the Ministry of Rights were busy. Even after he went to the yamen, he still had many things to do. He walked into the study and habitually glanced at a bronze mirror on the table. His eyes narrowed slightly. A strange rune appeared on the bronze mirror. Lu Qing set up a soundproof formation and picked up the bronze mirror. After activating it with his spiritual power, a man's face appeared on the bronze mirror. Lu Qing's face darkened. He said, "You finally contacted me. How long do I have to stay in the Shindu?" The man said, 3 years. Lu Qing's face was filled with anger. He said sternly, 3 years again? That's what you said 3 years ago. 3 years ago you still said the same thing. I've been in the Shindu for 10 years. In order to not arouse suspicion, I bought a house, married a wife, and even had 2 children. I went from an 8th-rank official to an assistant director of the Ministry of Rights. Now you're telling me 3 years again. How many years has it been? The man frowned. Watch your attitude. Don't forget who helped you avenge your parents. Lu Qing snorted coldly. If it weren't for this matter, do you think I would listen to your nonsense here? Tell me you haven't contacted me much in the past 10 years. What do you want me to do this time? The man said, I didn't contact you for your safety. Now there's something important that I need your help with. The imperial examination is coming soon. I've arranged for some of our people to participate in the examination. You have to help them pass the examination. That's impossible. Lu Qing flatly rejected him. I don't need to say more about the importance of the imperial examination to the imperial court. This is the first year that the imperial court is free from the 4 academies. There must be countless eyes watching. The Ministry of Personnel, the Imperial Ancestral Temple, and the Internal Guards. No matter who has the ability, they can't do anything to the imperial examination. The man said lightly, as far as I know, the imperial examination is organized by the Ministry of Rights. You are the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Isn't it easy to help a few people? Lu Qing shook his head. The risk is too great. I can't do it. Who knew that Cui Ming was also your spy and accidentally exposed himself? Now the imperial court is investigating spies very closely. People like me are the main suspects. Every day I go to the imperial court in fear. Do you know how much pressure I'm under? The man's voice was unquestionable. This is an order. I'm not discussing it with you. Don't forget who avenged your parents. If I didn't send you to the academy, you wouldn't be where you are today. You should know the consequences of disobeying orders. Your wife, your children, and you will all die without a burial place. Lu Qing looked out of the window at the 2 children who were laughing and playing in the yard. After a while, he withdrew his gaze and asked, Aren't you afraid that I'll be exposed? The man said lightly, Cui Ming's identity was accidentally exposed. You are different from Cui Ming. You are my spy. Only I know your identity. As long as I don't say it, no one will know. Lu Qing was silent for a moment and said, Okay. The man said, I'll give you the list as soon as possible. Lu Qing asked, Do they know my identity? The man said, No. The fewer people who know about your identity as a spy, the better. Lu Qing nodded and said, I'll do my best to help them. But I can't guarantee that I won't be exposed. Over the years, I've been undercover in the imperial court and found a lot of secrets. Just in case I have to give these things to you first. You need to come to Luoyang. The man was silent for a moment and said, 3 days later, 300 miles northwest of Luoyang. Chapter 303. After the morning court session, Li Mu did not leave the palace immediately. Mr. Mei was waiting for him outside the Ziwei Palace. She had received a signal from Li Mu during the court session. Seeing Li Mu walk out, she asked, "What's the matter?" Li Mu replied, "It's nothing important. How's the matter with Cui Ming?" Li Mu had been delayed by the case of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, so he did not pay attention to the matter with Cui Ming. Ever since he escaped from Luoyang and Shangguanli led people to hunt him down, there had been no news of him. Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "There's been no response from Ali for the time being. Cui Ming is now wanted by the 36 counties, so he definitely won't dare to show himself. He's probably hiding somewhere." Li Mu could only blame himself for not foreseeing this. If he had the sound-transmitting conch with him, Cui Ming's soul would have been scattered by now. But it was too late for regrets. Li Mu asked again, "How's the investigation of the demon sect spies going?" Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "Nothing. Even a fourth-rank official had been infiltrated. It was impossible to say that there were no spies from the demon sect in the Greizhou court. Perhaps they were hiding in the court but no one knew about them. The demon sect was after the Greizhou. They had been infiltrating the court since 100 years ago and constantly stirring up trouble everywhere. Those who could be chosen as spies were not ordinary people. Their minds were abnormally firm, and they could hide for years or even decades without exposing themselves. The soul-sucking technique would not work on them, and the soul-searching technique was not realistic either. Even if a 10-year-old official in the imperial court looked cautious and conscientious, there was no guarantee that he did not have any ill intentions towards the great Zhou dynasty. The entire Shin-du seemed calm and peaceful. However, no one knew how many undercurrents were lurking beneath this tranquility. Mr. Mei said, "If there are still spies from the demon sect or other forces in the imperial court, we won't be able to find them in such a short time. The most important thing now is the imperial examination. We have to make sure that there are no problems with the candidates from each county." Li Mu had already discussed this matter with the others when he was in the secretariat. Talents for the imperial examination were recommended by each county. The advantage was that it could break the academy's monopoly on the officials and reduce the omission of talents. The disadvantage was that the people recommended by each county were both good and bad. It would be fine if they were not talented, as they would not be able to pass the imperial examination. However, if they were talented but not virtuous or were simply spies sent by various forces with ulterior motives, the harm to the Great Zhou was continuous. Therefore, the selection of talents for the imperial examination was also regulated by the Hall of Secretaries when they formulated policies. The people chosen by the local government had to come from the local area and have a household register. Furthermore, within 3 generations they could not commit any serious crimes. After passing the imperial examination, they would be further investigated by the Ministry of Justice. This would be able to keep out most of the people who broke the law. If they were still infiltrated under such high pressure, the imperial court would have to admit defeat. They could not search everyone's soul, and even if they did, they could not be 100% sure that there would be no problems. In order to prevent the spread of Taoist magic arts, the Haotian Taoism would let their core disciples cultivate some secret arts to prevent their secrets from being discovered. It was very likely that the demon sect also had such secret arts. That day in the Golden Palace, Cui Ming could fearlessly ask the Empress to search his soul. It was very likely that he was confident that he would not be discovered. Unfortunately, he had encountered an unreliable teammate. From this, it could be seen that the fewer people who knew about such a secret, the better. After leaving the palace, Li Mu returned to the North Court. There was still some time before the imperial examination, so he had enough time to prepare. Walking on the quiet streets of the North Court, he passed by a mansion. A woman came down from a carriage parked in front of the mansion. This woman did not expect to meet Li Mu here. She stared at him with hatred in her eyes. Li Mu and Zhou Chu's mother looked at each other. This woman with madness in her eyes was the mastermind behind this case. If it was not for the Zhou family's death exemption medallion, she would be in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, just like the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. The woman looked at Li Mu with madness in her eyes and said, "I let you escape this time. Next time, I don't know if you will be so lucky." Li Mu looked at her and said with a smile, "This is what I wanted to say to you. You are lucky this time. If there is a next time, do you think the Zhou family will still be able to protect you with a death exemption medallion?" Although Li Mu was smiling, his gaze made her feel cold. The woman did not dare to look at him again. She looked away and hurriedly walked into the mansion. In the mansion, a woman came up to her and supported her. She said, "Mother, why didn't you tell me you were coming? I would have asked Zhuang Yun to send someone to pick you up." A man also came up and bowed to her. He said, "Your son-in-law greets mother-in-law." The woman said, "I came here to ask Zhuang Yun for help." The man raised his eyebrows, but the smile on his face became even brighter. He asked, "What do you need, mother-in-law? Just say it." The woman gritted her teeth and said, "You know that Chuer died tragically at the hands of that evil man Li Mu. Your father is cruel and did not avenge Chu. Unfortunately, I am weak and can only watch that evil man roam freely in Luoyang. Zhuang Yun is the vice minister of the Supreme Court. He must have a way to avenge your brother." The man smiled and said, "Welcome, mother-in-law. Please rest in the inner courtyard." The woman asked, "Then about your brother?" The man said, "How can I not listen to mother-in-law? This is not the place to talk. Let's go in first." He led the woman in. When they entered the inner courtyard, his lips moved slightly but no sound came out. After entering the inner courtyard, the woman looked at the man. Just as she was about to speak, a servant suddenly rushed in from outside. He said, "Sir, it's not good. The Supreme Court sent someone. They said that there is an emergency in the temple. The minister wants you to go there immediately." The man looked at the woman and said awkwardly, "It's not convenient for me right now." The servant said, "I saw that person in a hurry. It seems that there is something important. If you delay it, I'm afraid the minister will blame you." The man looked helpless. He could only look at the woman and said, "Mother-in-law, it's really unfortunate. The Supreme Court has an emergency and needs me to deal with it. I will be back soon." After saying that, he strode out of the inner courtyard. He did not slow down until he walked out of the mansion. He said to the servant, "Stay at home. When she leaves, come to the Supreme Court and inform me." The servant asked, "What if she doesn't leave?" The man said, "In a while, get someone to buy a bedding and send it to the Supreme Court. There are too many old cases in the Supreme Court. I'm afraid I will have to live in the Supreme Court from now on." When Li Mu returned home, he saw that the Empress was also there. Xiaobai was teaching her how to make dumplings. This was something he envied the Empress for. The two of them left court at the same time, but she always arrived home earlier than Li Mu. Li Mu only needed to cross 2 streets to get home from the palace. She only needed a thought. The Empress was a cultivation genius. Her learning ability was naturally extraordinary. Chinese chess was taught to her by Li Mu, but she only used an hour to defeat him. As for making dumplings, Xiaobai demonstrated it to her a few times, and she was able to make it look like it was real. After she learned how to make dumplings, Xiaobai seemed very accomplished. She said, "I will teach Sister Zhou how to make dumplings later. In the future, if you want to eat them, you can make them at home." Zhou Yi put down the dumplings in her hands and said calmly, "Sister doesn't have a home." Xiaobai was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled and said, "Sister Zhou, you can treat this as your home in the future." Chapter 304. These days, Li Si's performance really exceeded Li Mu's expectations. Back in the North County, with Chen Miaomiao by his side, it was understandable that Li Si restrained himself. But this was the divine capital, thousands of miles away from the North County. Chen Miaomiao was far away on Baiyin Mountain. Li Si didn't hang around brothels or hook up with girls. After all, he had lost his primordial young long ago. Even if he really messed around in the divine capital, Chen Miaomiao wouldn't find out. But he didn't. He locked himself in his room all day to prepare for the exam. If he didn't have to go to the Ministry of Justice to check his identity today, he might not even leave the inn. When he indulged himself, Li Mu was shocked. When he restrained himself, Li Mu was shocked. On the way to the Ministry of Justice, Li Si asked, "How's your friend?" Li Mu asked, "Which friend?" As soon as he said this, he remembered who Li Si was talking about. Li Mu said, "You're right. He and that girl have reconciled, but it's not like what you said. There's just a small misunderstanding between them. It'll be fine after they explain it clearly." Li Si raised his eyebrows. "It's not like that?" Li Mu said, "Between a man and a woman, besides love, there's also friendship. It's not necessarily like what you said." Li Si asked, "Is she beautiful?" Li Mu nodded. "Yes." In all fairness, the Empress's appearance was at least in the top 10 of the divine capital's 100 beauties. Whether she wore a dragon robe or ordinary clothes, she was beautiful. Li Si asked again, "Is your friend handsome?" Li Mu said, "He's as handsome as me." Li Si looked at him meaningfully but didn't say anything. Li Mu looked up and said, "We've arrived at the Ministry of Justice." Even though the 36 counties had already investigated the identities of the candidates, the imperial court still had to investigate again in order to prevent people with ulterior motives from mixing in. A long queue had already formed at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice. They were all the examinees who were here for the identity verification today. Among them, Li Mu saw many wearing the uniforms of the 3 academies. Although the imperial court no longer chose officials directly from the students of the academy, the students of the academy still had a lot of privileges in the imperial examinations. Any student of the academy could directly participate in the imperial examinations without being nominated by the local government. The academy had a history of 100 years and had contributed far more to the Great Zhou than to the destruction. It was unrealistic to directly exclude the academy from the imperial examination. In fact, although the imperial court had introduced the imperial examination, it still could not change the special status of the academy. The students who had been taught in the academy for a few years were far superior to the local talents in terms of character and talent in all aspects. In order to completely change the academy's domination of the imperial court, they had to strengthen the local basic education. This was not something that could be changed overnight. Of course, the academy was also aware of this. Therefore, when the empress almost arbitrarily carried out the imperial examination, there was not much resistance from the academy. Whether it was changed or not, it did not have a big impact on the academy. Although Li Mu had acquaintances in the Ministry of Justice, he did not openly seek special treatment. He stood at the back of the queue with Li Si. However, when he stood in the queue, a few students in front of him who were wearing the academy's uniforms did not even line up. They moved far away and looked at him in horror. The scene of Li Mu grabbing people at the entrance of the 3 academies with a metal chain in his hand was still engraved in their minds. They were really worried that Li Mu would suddenly conjure a metal chain in his hand and directly put it around their necks. In the 3 academies, Li Mu's name was taboo. The bailiffs of the Ministry of Justice quickly noticed the abnormality here. They thought that someone was causing trouble. Immediately, 2 bailiffs came over. When they saw Li Mu, they were shocked and quickly invited him into the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu was here to check his identity this time, not to cause trouble. However, it was obvious that his presence here would affect the normal order of the examination. He had no choice but to walk into the Ministry of Justice with Li Si. The examination this time was supervised by the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Personnel, the Ministry of Rights, and the Imperial Clan Temple. In the front yard of the Ministry of Justice stood several officials from different offices. It was obvious that the imperial court attached great importance to the imperial examination. Zhou Zhong walked over slowly and asked, "Lord Li, what brings you to the Ministry of Justice today?" Li Mu said, "To participate in the identity examination." Zhou Zhong asked, "Lord Li wants to participate in the imperial examination?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Can't I?" The officials then realized that although Li Mu had caused a lot of trouble in the divine capital, he was not an official of the imperial court from the academy. He was only a bailiff and an imperial censor, but he was already able to cause a lot of trouble in the imperial court. If he passed the imperial examination and had an official identity, what would happen? Yes. Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "Lord Li, you don't have to be examined anymore." Li Mu shook his head and said, "There are no exceptions before the imperial examination. Lord Zhou, just treat me as an ordinary examinee." Zhou Zhong did not say anything else. When the Ministry of Rights was short of manpower and was facing the imperial examinations, they urgently needed officials to preside over them. He, who had just been transferred to the Ministry of Rights, was promoted to Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. This saved him at least 10 years of struggle. Seeing him vomit blood, there were still officials who asked uncertainly, "Lord Lu, are you really okay?" Lu Qing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "I'm fine." When the crowd saw this, they could not help but respect him. Before today, when they mentioned this assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, they only thought that he was lucky to climb to his current position. Now, it seemed that this person was so ruthless to himself that it was no coincidence that he was able to climb to his current position. This was also the first time Li Mu had seen such a ruthless person. He couldn't help but take a few more glances. He realized that, besides being ruthless to himself, this assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites was also rather handsome. Although he was not as bewitching as Cui Ming, he could definitely be considered a handsome man, comparable to several Zhang Chuns. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites also noticed him. He clasped his hands and said, "This must be Lord Li Mu. My apologies, my apologies." Li Mu clasped his hands and said, "Lord Lu has truly worked hard for the imperial court." Lu Qing chuckled and said, "This official is only doing what is required of me. I can't compare to Lord Li's contributions to the imperial court." As the two exchanged a few words of praise, they suddenly heard quarreling from the side. "Why can't I take the examination? Give it back to me. Go, go, go. Don't delay the others here." Li Mu turned his head and saw a familiar figure. Wei Peng was being pushed out by two officials from the Ministry of Justice. His face was red as he argued with them about something. Li Mu quickly understood the reason. If Wei Peng had come to the Ministry of Justice to examine his qualifications for the imperial examination, there was a very high chance that he would not pass. His father, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, Wei Ting, had just been removed from his post by the Empress. According to the rules, the first 3 generations of the Wei clan could not participate in the imperial examination. Wei Peng was currently the son of a guilty official, so he naturally could not pass the examination of the Ministry of Justice. Zhou Zhong walked over and glanced at Wei Peng. He asked the official from the Ministry of Justice, "What's going on?" The official bowed and said, "Lord Lu, this person is the son of a guilty official. According to the law, he cannot participate in the imperial examination." Zhou Zhong said, "The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue was convicted after he received the examination. The Ministry of Justice's examination is only for those with bad intentions. Since he received the examination, he has the qualifications to participate in the imperial examination. The Ministry of Justice has no right to take away his right to participate." Since the assistant minister had already spoken, the official from the Ministry of Justice did not dare to say more. He obediently returned the examination to Wei Peng. Wei Peng took the examination and bowed to Zhou Zhong. "Thank you, Lord Lu." Zhou Zhong indifferently glanced at him and said, "I am acting according to the law." Chapter 305. Li Mu did not expect Zhou Zhong to help Wei Peng out of trouble. In principle, Wei Ting had already become a criminal. The 3rd generation of the Wei family could not take the imperial examinations. As Wei Ting's son, Wei Peng did not even have the right to take the imperial examinations. Zhou Zhong's reason, if one looked closely, did not hold water. However, he was the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. The reason he gave sounded a little reasonable. Since he protected Wei Peng, the officials of the Ministry of Justice did not dare to say anything. The officials of the Ministry of Personnel, the Ministry of Rites, and the Ancestral Temple also did not stand up against him for such an insignificant matter. After the examination, Li Mu and Li Si left the Ministry of Justice. As the crowd at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice moved, another examinee stepped into the Yamen to be questioned by the officials of the Ministry of Justice. Name? Xinhao. Place of birth? Yushan County. Outside the Yamen, upon hearing this name, the eyes of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites flashed. He suddenly said, "This is the first imperial examination of the imperial court. It is of great significance to the Great Zhou. I fear that there will be various factions trying to disrupt the examination. We must be careful." The minister said, "It is precisely because of this that the Ministry of Justice is conducting today's examination." Lu Qing shook his head slightly and said, "In my opinion, the magic treasure used by the Ministry of Justice to detect lies is more like a decoration. Those who are magnanimous will naturally not fear it. Those who are truly guilty will definitely have something to rely on if they dare to come to the Ministry of Justice. They will not fear this magic treasure." The minister thought for a moment and nodded. Assistant Minister Lu's words are reasonable. However, it is impossible to perform a soul search on everyone. Not only is it difficult to carry out, it is also easy to cause chaos. Lu Qing shook his head. Naturally, there is no need to investigate everyone. As long as we investigate those who are highly suspicious, we can eliminate most of the risks. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel snorted disdainfully. "It is easy for you to say. How do we know who we should suspect and who we should not?" Lu Qing glanced at him and said, "As we all know, demon sect spies generally require a handsome appearance. Cui Ming is an example. The imperial examination is of great importance. It's not too much to examine candidates who are too handsome. After some thought, Minister Zhongjin said, I think that Sir Lu's words make sense. The imperial examination concerns the future of the imperial court. No matter how careful we are, we can't be too careful. If we find out later, I'm afraid we won't be able to escape the blame. After discussing with each other, they all agreed to Lu Qing's suggestion. It was just a little more effort. If it could eliminate some of the risks that might erupt in the future, it was worth it. Lu Qing pointed at an examinee who had walked out of the office and said, You come over here. The examinee Zhou Zheng walked over nervously and asked, Sir, do you have any orders? Lu Qing asked, What's your name? The examinee said, My name is Xn Hao. Lu Qing looked at Zhou Zheng and the others and said, This examinee's appearance is extremely outstanding. Why don't we start with him? I've been injured in my cultivation recently and can't use too much mana. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you all. Zhou Zheng walked out and said, I'll do it. The examinee's face was filled with shock and worry. He didn't understand and said, Sir, what is this for? Lu Qing patted him on the shoulder and said, Don't worry. We're just going to perform a simple soul search on you. If there are no problems, we'll let you go. The examinee was confused and said, Why? We didn't say that today's examination needed a soul search. Why didn't the others use it? Lu Qing comforted him and said, Don't be afraid. Sir Zhou is just going to ask you a few simple questions. After you're done, you can leave. The young man called Xn Hao, although his expression was calm, the fear in his heart had already reached an extreme. That official didn't tell him that the Ministry of Justice's initial investigation required a soul capture. He only said that they had people in the court who would help them pass the imperial examination and avoid the subsequent investigations. Without any prior preparation, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't say something that he shouldn't say when his soul capture was carried out. Lu Qing saw his hesitation and asked, What, is there a problem? Xn Hao shook his head and said, No. If he did not resist, he might be able to get away with it. As long as he showed the slightest sign of resistance, he would probably immediately give himself away. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he had already obtained a secret dossier beforehand. Within the dossier, there was detailed information on most of the officials in the court. This Zhou Zheng, the Assistant Minister of Justice, had the strength of the Fifth Realm. In order to resist a soul search, he had deliberately trained his mind. With the strength of the Assistant Minister of Justice, it should be impossible for him to break through the defenses in his heart. Thinking of this, he was much more relieved. He walked up to Zhou Zheng of his own accord and said, Sir, you may begin. Zhou Zheng nodded and said, Look into my eyes. Xn Hao raised his head and looked into Zhou Zheng's eyes. He only felt that Zhou Zheng's eyes had suddenly become a whirlpool, as if trying to suck in all of his mind. However, his mind was extremely firm. Although there was confusion in his eyes as if his soul had already been searched, in the depths of his heart, he had always maintained a clear mind. Xn Hao thought that Zhou Zheng would immediately ask him questions, but he quickly discovered that Zhou Zheng's soul search had not stopped. On the contrary, the whirlpool in Zhou Zheng's eyes spun faster and faster. It was so fast that the part of his mind he used to maintain his consciousness was uncontrollably sucked in by the whirlpool. In his shock, Xn Hao wanted to immediately look away. It was also at this moment that the whirlpool in Zhou Zheng's eyes spun at its peak speed, completely controlling his mind. After an unknown amount of time, Xn Hao finally felt his consciousness return. He saw Zhou Zheng looking at him expressionlessly. The officials standing around him all had shocked expressions. Xn Hao had already realized what had happened. Without hesitation, he activated a magic treasure he had hidden in his sleeve. His body disappeared from where he stood. The next time he appeared, he was already outside the Ministry of Justice. He placed a fulu on his body and turned into a ray of light, dashing into the distance. Trying to run? They are indeed spies from the demon sect. How dare they? A few auras shot into the sky from the Ministry of Justice and headed in the direction he had disappeared. The sudden change of events stunned the candidates who were still queuing up outside the Ministry of Justice. On the streets of the divine capital, Li Mu had just parted ways with Li Si. He was about to head home when he suddenly raised his head and looked behind him. A figure could be seen flying across the sky at a rapid speed. In the divine capital, unless there were special circumstances, flying was prohibited. There were a few figures chasing after the person. Li Mu sensed a familiar aura among the figures. After he reacted, He raised his hand and a golden ray of light flew out from his hand. Whoosh! After the sound of wind breaking, the figure that was flying in front suddenly stopped. His body was tied up by a golden rope, and the Fa Li in his body was quickly sealed. He fell from the sky and fainted. When Li Mu walked to his side, the other figures also descended from the sky. He looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "What's going on?" Zhou Zhong glanced at the person on the ground and said, "This person is a spy from the demon sect. After I used the soul assimilation technique on him, he tried to escape." "Thank you for your help, Lord Li," Li Mu said. "It was just a matter of convenience. You could have caught him even if I didn't do anything." Then he asked in surprise, "How did you find out that he was a spy from the demon sect?" Zhou Zhong said, "This person is handsome and attracted Lord Lu's suspicion. After I used the soul assimilation technique on him, I found out that he was a spy from the demon sect." The assistant minister of personnel looked at Lu Qing and said, "Lord Lu's eyes are as sharp as torches. You saw through his identity with a single glance." Lu Qing waved his hand and said, "I don't have such ability. I just happen to be lucky." The deputy minister sighed and said, "Lord Lu's luck is really good these days." He had just been transferred to the Ministry of Rights when the Assistant Minister of Rights was in trouble. Coincidentally, the Ministry of Rights was short of people for the imperial examination, so he was promoted to Assistant Minister. The first person he met with was a spy from the demon sect. His luck was really unparalleled. In this short period of time, Zhou Zhong had already completed the soul assimilation technique on this person. He said in a low voice, "He still has 3 accomplices in the inn. Lords, follow me and take down these demon sect spies." On the first day of the Ministry of Justice's investigation, they found out that there were spies from the demon sect who tried to sneak into the imperial examination. If they were lucky enough to pass the imperial examination and avoid the investigation, they would bring a lot of trouble to the imperial court. In addition, through the soul assimilation technique on these 4 people, they found out that there were still spies from the demon sect in the Great Zhou court. This news caused quite a stir in the imperial court. However, the 4 people didn't know the identity of the spy. The imperial court could only wait for this person to reveal himself. Only then would they find out. Cui Ming had been a spy for more than 10 years before he was accidentally discovered. No one knew who the next Cui Ming would be. The newly promoted Assistant Minister of Rights had undoubtedly contributed the most in this incident. If it weren't for his suggestion, these 4 demon sect spies wouldn't have been discovered so early. There had always been rumors in the imperial court about Lu Qing's promotion to Assistant Minister of Rights. They believed that he had relied on luck to obtain his current position. If it weren't for the previous Assistant Minister of Rights accident and the Ministry of Rights confirmation, this position wouldn't have been his. This time these people all shut their mouths. Luck was also a kind of strength. Why was it that he was always the one with good luck? This already explained everything. After this incident, although Lu Qing didn't receive any rewards, his wife received the status of a woman with a title. This meant that this newly appointed Assistant Minister of Rights and his family had truly stepped into the ranks of the nobility in the divine capital, Lu Manor. In the study, Lu Qing snapped his fingers and a ball of flame appeared out of thin air. A bronze mirror on the table slowly flew up. After being enveloped by the flame, it quickly melted and turned into a pool of bronze liquid. Chapter 306. The imperial examinations were the cradle of the Great Zhou's officials. Li Mu guessed that the opposing powers of the Great Zhou wouldn't let go of this opportunity. However, he didn't expect the demon sect to be so brazen. It was a pity that they had gone through so much trouble to open up a path and send the spy to the divine capital, only to lose in an unexpected way. Spies were suspected because they were too handsome. After this matter, it was likely that the several demonic path sects would change their bad habit of judging people by their appearance. The more handsome and beautiful a spy was, the easier it was to arouse suspicion and the easier it was to be exposed. Of course, this wasn't necessarily a good thing for the imperial court. If the demon sect changed their habit of judging people by their appearance, it would be more difficult for the imperial court to find the spy. The investigation by Cui Ming and the Ministry of Justice made Li Mu realize that the demon sect's infiltration of the Great Zhou court had reached a level where they would stop at nothing. This power that covered the entire ancestral state was like a terrorist organization, stirring up storms in various countries. The Great Zhou seemed powerful, but the imperial court was divided internally by the new party and the old party. Apart from internal troubles, there were also many external troubles. The ghost realm and the demon nation wanted to leave Yudu and the wilderness, and the dragon race didn't want to stay in the dark depths of the sea forever. The surrounding countries seemed to be subservient, but they were probably already disloyal behind the scenes. They were happy to see the Great Zhou wither away and collapse. In addition to the demon sect's invasion, this prosperous country was already riddled with holes. The Empress had probably realized this long ago. She didn't want to be the Empress, but she had no choice but to sit in that position. In the entire Great Zhou, she was the only one who could convince everyone to sit in that position. Once she gave up, the new party and the old party would inevitably cause an even greater dispute. When that time came with internal and external troubles, the Great Zhou's empire might come to an end. She would also become the last empress in the history of the Great Zhou. The empress definitely did not want to become the ruler of a fallen country, so she was facing a dilemma. Li Mu sat at the stone table in the courtyard and looked at the empress, who was watering the flowers in the garden with Xiao Bai. He thought to himself, the pressure of the rise and fall of the country is all on her shoulders. It's not strange that she would develop inner demons or split personalities. He had to pay more attention to the imperial examinations. Only by passing the imperial examinations would he be qualified to share some of the empress's burden. According to his estimation, out of the thousands of examinees, not many could finish all the questions in 4 hours. However, after only an hour, he saw someone leave the examination hall after handing in their papers. He recognized Li Mu and looked at his back as he left. He said disdainfully, "You're just relying on His Majesty's favor to jump up and down in the imperial court. When faced with a test of real ability, you have to show your true colors." Louis was beside him and asked, "Minister, are you talking about Li Mu?" The Minister of Revenue said, "Who else could it be? My exam paper is difficult for an ordinary person to answer in 4 hours. He left in an hour. I'm afraid he didn't calculate much." Louis shook his head and said, "Minister, do you know who came up with the mathematics exam paper?" The Minister of Revenue asked, "Isn't it your minister?" Louis said, "It's Lord Li." The Minister of Revenue was stunned for a moment. He then asked, "You mean to say that the exam paper I received was written by him? He came up with the mathematics exam paper himself?" Louis nodded and said, "You can understand it that way." The Minister of Revenue frowned and said, "How can that be?" Louis said, "Minister, you don't have to doubt the fairness of the mathematics exam. Lord Li's attainments in mathematics are probably unmatched in the entire Great Zhou. Otherwise, the Secretariat wouldn't have let him write the mathematics exam paper. With Lord Li's ability, he doesn't need to prove himself in the imperial examination." During the month in the Secretariat, Lu Yi and the others had a deep understanding of Li Mu. Other people's impression of him might be that he was a hothead who cursed the heavens and the earth, but the 6 officials of the Secretariat of the Central Secretariat knew very well that Li Mu was not only proficient in mathematics and criminal law, but also often had unique opinions when it came to political affairs. He didn't need to use the imperial examination to prove his ability. This was because the imperial examination used his ability as a blueprint to select talents. The imperial examination lasted for 3 days. The first day tested mathematics in the morning, criminal law in the afternoon, policy on the second day, and cultivation on the last day. Mathematics was very simple for Li Mu. However, the criminal law exam was different. Criminal law was one of the 4 subjects of the imperial examination. It was extremely important. After receiving the exam paper, Li Mu knew that the person who came up with the questions was something. There wasn't a single question in the entire exam paper that tested the original text of the law of the Great Zhou. All of the questions on criminal law were based on case studies. Moreover, they weren't simple cases. The cases involved were often more complicated. Sometimes there would be discussions on law and morality. Li Mu often had to think for a long time before he could write down many of the questions. When he was leaving after the exam, Li Mu happened to meet the director of the Ministry of Justice and asked him a question. According to the director of the Ministry of Justice, the questions on criminal law were set by the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong. This was the same as Li Mu's guess. Only he could come up with such strange questions. The policy questions on the second day were much simpler for him. This subject was about how to govern a country. The students of the 3 great academies were very good at this. The policy questions were set by the Secretariat. During that month, Li Mu and the 6 officials of the Secretariat discussed it countless times. Other than the criminal law exam, the other 2 subjects were basically the same as the questions that Li Mu came up with and answered by himself. In the future, if he was short on money, he could write a few sets of mock exam papers and set up a pre-imperial examination class. Those who were qualified to receive education and could participate in the imperial examination were mostly rich people. A few sets of exam papers would allow him to make a lot of money. This was much faster than opening a shop. It was a completely cost-free business. He stood there blankly. The examiner glanced at him and said indifferently, "Your Majesty Ding." Beside the drill ground, a clerk recorded the examinee's result. The examiner shook his head in disappointment. He looked at the next examinee and said, "You come out." The second examinee had already refined 5 souls. It was clear that he had learned the rock leap technique. His footwork and figure seemed to have some kind of routine. He managed to last a few more moves against the examiner. After sending him flying with a kick, the examiner said calmly, "Your Majesty Ding next." "Your Majesty Ding next." "Your Majesty Ding, continue." Li Mu stood in the crowd and watched the examinees in front of him take the test one by one. Their results had a lot to do with their cultivation. Generally speaking, if they were in the soul refinement realm, they would be classified as grade D. As for whether they were grade D, or grade D, it would depend on their performance in the test. In the combat test, they could use their own Dharma spells and Abhijna, but they could not rely on Fulu Dharma treasures or other external objects. Li Mu could tell that the Ministry of War was very concerned about the examinees' actual combat ability. Even if they were only in the soul refinement realm, if they were able to last a few more moves against the examiner, they might be evaluated as grade C. If they were in the soul condensation realm but only had dermic powers and were defeated in 1 or 2 moves, they would only be given grade D. The examiner did not bully the examinees. When he encountered soul refinement realm examinees, he would only use the dermic powers of the soul refinement realm. When he encountered soul condensation realm and spirit condensation realm examinees, he would raise his dermic powers to maintain the same level as the examinees. However, the difference between cultivators of the same realm could sometimes be so great that it was unimaginable. This examiner was very experienced in actual combat. Even if they were of the same cultivation level, he could easily crush these examinees. This must have been trained from hundreds of battles. From the murderous aura emanating from his body, it was not hard to guess that he had been on a real battlefield before. Be it soul refinement realm or spirit condensation realm examinees, they were powerless against him. As for transcendent realm examinees, Li Mu had not seen them in this group yet. This kind of crushing battle started and ended quickly. Soon it was Li Mu's turn. The examiner looked at Li Mu and asked, "What's your name?" Li Mu walked out and said, "Li Mu." If there was no important matter, officials of the Ministry of War would not attend court. Only now did the examiner know that the person in front of him was Li Mu, the one who had been causing chaos in the fairies' capital recently. This person's cultivation level had clearly reached the middle realm. The examiner suppressed his dermic powers to the 4th realm and said, "Choose a weapon." Li Mu said, "I'm used to using my fists." The examiner did not waste any more words. He said calmly, "Then let's begin." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Mu's figure disappeared. Bang! He punched out and the 2 fists collided. Both of them took a few steps back. The examiner's expression changed. He had thought that Li Mu, as a favored official of His Majesty, whose cultivation level had been forcefully raised by His Majesty, was just for show. However, this punch made him realize that the dermic powers in his body were solid and deep. In other words, he truly had the strength of the 4th realm. The examiner laughed loudly. "Finally, I've met an interesting one." With that, he took the initiative to attack Li Mu. Seeing that the examiner had no intention of using his divine powers, Li Mu was too lazy to use them. He fought barehanded with the examiner. This person was indeed experienced in battle, but Li Mu's fighting formula was not to be trifled with. The examiner used his consciousness and experience to fight, while Li Mu used Taoist techniques to drive his body's instincts. Bang! 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 Dust flew up from the drill ground. Neither of them used any divine powers. They fought purely with their physical bodies. The more the examiner fought with Li Mu, the more shocked he became. From the beginning he had been searching for Li Mu's weakness, but until now he had not been able to find it. Li Mu's battle experience was not at all inferior to his. In fact, he was even more experienced than him. As long as he revealed the slightest weakness, he would pursue and attack relentlessly. Gradually, as an examiner, he was actually at a disadvantage. The examiner was shocked. The surrounding examinees all stared with their eyes wide open. Especially the examiner who had just been completely defeated by the examiner. He knew very well how terrifying the examiner was. However, such a terrifying existence was actually being suppressed by someone and could only passively defend. At the side of the field, another examiner watched for a while. He laughed loudly and said, "Examiner, let me help you." With that, he flew into the fray. Fighting 1 against 2, one of them was already in the divine powers realm, while the other had suppressed his strength to the divine powers realm. The pressure should have increased greatly. However, to Li Mu there was not much of a difference. Under the effects of Dao techniques, his body was completely relying on instinct. With one more person, the only difference was that the speed at which his mana was depleted would be faster. Seeing that the two examiners had attacked at the same time and could only barely salvage the situation, not only were the surrounding examinees shocked, even the examiners from the other two groups not far away had gathered around. Who is this person? How can he be so fierce? Chapter 309. The combat examination had ended, and so had the first imperial examination of the imperial court. What the examinees needed to do next was to wait for the results of the written examination. Li Mu was about to leave the drill ground when a voice came from behind him. "Martial scholar, please wait." Li Mu turned around and followed the source of the voice. He saw a figure walking towards him. That person had a tall stature and a square face. As he slowly walked over, an extremely strong oppressive feeling also came rushing over. All the examinees knew this person. He was the chief examiner of this examination, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, and also a cultivator of the 6th realm. Li Mu clasped his fists and asked, "Is there anything else, Lord Assistant Minister?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of War smiled and said, "I have left the army for many years. It has been many years since I've seen such an exciting battle of the martial way. I'm excited by the prospect and can't help but want to spar with the martial scholar." Li Mu looked at him in shock. No matter how confident he was in himself, he was not arrogant enough to challenge the Dongxian. As if reading his thoughts, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War added, "Rest assured, martial scholar. We will not use spells or supernatural powers. We will only spar with martial arts. We will not go overboard." Since it was like this, Li Mu couldn't refuse any more. He nodded and pointed at the drill ground beside him. "Please." On the drill ground, the examinees and the examinees were about to leave when they suddenly stopped. On the drill ground, two figures were engaged in close combat. It was difficult to tell who had the upper hand. At first, the official of the Ministry of War thought that someone was fighting on the drill ground. When he got closer, he realized that it was the assistant minister and the martial scholar, Li Mu. Soon after, many people's faces were filled with extreme shock. Who was the assistant minister? Before he became the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, he was a famous general in the Great Zhou. He had killed countless cultivators of the Yao Kingdom on the battlefield. In terms of martial arts, there were not many people in the Great Zhou who could beat him. A young man who was not even 20 years old was actually on par with him in martial arts. One had to know that martial arts and spells were different. As long as one had enough mana, they could learn spells and spells. However, without experiencing life and death battles, without a lot of battle experience, it was very difficult to make any progress in martial arts. He was so young, but his attainments in martial arts were so profound. It was simply inconceivable. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. The Zhou brothers and Prince Nan's crown prince watched from afar with fear on their faces. They had stayed in the academy for 2 years and had heard of Li Mu's name, especially the Zhou brothers. Because of Zhou Chu's death, Li Mu and the Zhou family had an irreconcilable blood feud. However, this did not mean that they would take Li Mu seriously. Everything that he had done was merely because he had the support of the Empress. If it had been anyone else, the result would have been the same. However, today's combat examination had greatly shocked them. They had been trained as the crown prince. A qualified crown prince had to be able to rule the country and maintain order in martial arts. In terms of cultivation, they were confident that they could compete with any genius in the world, including the core disciples of the 4 sects and 6 schools. Only this Li Mu had shattered their confidence. Zhou Feng took a deep breath and said, "Martial arts cannot represent all one's strength. When cultivators fight, Fulu and magic weapons are the key to victory." Although this was somewhat self-comforting, it was also the truth. A low-level cultivator using a high-level Fulu to instantly kill a mid-level cultivator was not uncommon in the cultivation world. In most cases, when cultivators fought, it was still based on who had more Fulu, better pills, and stronger magic weapons. Other than on the battlefield, martial arts did not have much use. Such a person could be a good general, but no matter how powerful a general was, he was still just a subject. After being shocked, Zhou Feng breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Li Mu's surname was Li, and not Xiao. Otherwise, many people in the Zhou clan would not be able to sleep because of him. The Crown Prince of the South also breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Li Mu was not a member of the Zhou clan. Otherwise, he would have become the greatest obstacle to the Xiao clan regaining the throne. On the drill ground, Li Mu and the assistant minister of the Ministry of War had been in a stalemate for 15 minutes. In the past quarter of an hour, Li Mu finally realized what a real powerhouse was. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War was extremely experienced in battle. After 100 moves, Li Mu still had not found a flaw. This kind of person's comprehension of martial arts had probably reached an extremely profound level. Across from Li Mu, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War's gaze grew more and more shocked. Li Mu had not found a flaw, and he had also not found a flaw in Li Mu's. His martial arts experience had been honed through countless life-and-death situations and thousands of battles. No matter how talented a young man was, it was impossible for him to achieve this. The only possibility was that he had completely inherited the martial arts attainments of a martial arts expert. In the martial examination, other than Fulu and magic treasures, Taoist techniques and Abhijna were all allowed. Li Mu clasped his fist and said, "Assistant Minister, please enlighten me." It had been a long time since he had experienced such a satisfying battle of the martial way. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War admired Li Mu. This psyche control technique was not a secret. His lips moved slightly as he whispered a few words to Li Mu. Psyche power cultivation was an unorthodox method. Li Mu knew how to use psyche power to speed up cultivation, but he had never heard of using psyche power to attack. Psyche control was actually a kind of magical power. After hearing the assistant minister's message, Li Mu formed a seal with both hands and channeled his mana. With himself as the center, he released his psyche power. Around the drill ground, the onlookers all felt a kind of pressure pressing against their faces. A few officials from the Ministry of War were fine. Their bodies only trembled a little before they stabilized themselves. Most of the examinees around them took several steps back. A few of the weaker ones even fainted. The examinees looked at Li Mu with shock and fear in their eyes. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War sent some spiritual energy to the unconscious examinees and woke them up. Then he said to Li Mu, "This is your first time using psyche control. You can't control it yet. With more practice you will be able to control it freely in a few months." Li Mu had already experienced this wonderful use of psyche power. He clasped his fist and said to the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, "Thank you, assistant minister." The assistant minister of the Ministry of War waved his hand and said to the crowd, "The martial arts examination has ended. You can all leave now." In 3 days, outside the examination hall, the results of the written examination will be announced. This time, the written examination took 2 days, but the combat examination only took half a day. Unlike the written examination, the results of the combat examination were announced on the same day. The first imperial examination of the imperial court was already the center of attention. After the combat examination ended, the news quickly spread throughout the fairy's capital. Before the combat examination, people had already guessed who would be the top scorer of the combat examination. The brothers Zhou Zheng and Zhou Feng were the sons of the Minister of War. They were also the most outstanding students of the Qingyun Academy. They were the sons of the South Prince. They were skilled in both civil and martial arts and were also outstanding talents of the younger generation. The Zhou family and the Xiao royal family had poured too many resources into them. Since a few years ago, they had been groomed as the crown prince of the Great Zhou. The top scorer of both the civil and martial examinations would most likely be one of them. No one had expected that the top scorer of the martial examination would be Li Mu. Li Mu was naturally well known in the fairy's capital. However, the reason why he was famous was because he punished young ruffians and forced the imperial court to abolish unfair laws. It was also because he spoke so bluntly that the court officials could not raise their heads. It was also because he stood up for the people and was not afraid of the nobles and the academy. He had completely changed the unrighteous trend in the fairies' capital. He was famous for his courage, his passion, his righteousness, and his good looks. After the combat examination, Li Mu used facts to show them that he was not only capable of these things. The Li residence. When Li Mu walked into the house, Xiaobai ran over excitedly and said, "Sister Zhou, let us see everything just now. Benefactor is so powerful." Li Mu looked around and asked, "Is your sister Zhou home too?" Zhou Yi walked out of the kitchen with a bowl of noodles and said, "This is my reward for you." The format of the written examination's results was different from the martial examination. It didn't use the A, B, C, or D grading method. For the 3 examination papers, full marks for each subject were 100 points. The results of the 3 subjects were summed up, and it was clear at a glance who was higher and who was lower. In addition, if any of the 3 subjects scored less than 60 points, no matter how high the other 2 subjects' scores were, they would be eliminated directly. After another half a day, all the examination papers were summarized. According to their scores, only 100 examinees would be selected out of the thousands of examinees in this imperial examination. These 100 examinees had already appeared, but they only had numbers and no names. The last step was to match their numbers with their names. Of course, everyone was most concerned about the top scorer of the written examination this time. After the results of the 3 subjects were summarized, many people gathered around. Then the crowd cried out in surprise. "Who is this person with the number 9527? He actually scored full marks for mathematics, criminal law, and policy questions." Not only mathematics, but there are many people who scored full marks for this subject. He actually scored full marks for criminal law and policy questions at the same time. Only one person scored full marks for those 2 subjects. Is it Zhou Zheng, Zhou Feng, or Prince Nan's son? Outside the crowd, a few officials from the secretariat stood there. Louis sighed, "I didn't expect Lord Li to score full marks for criminal law as well." The 6 imperial secretaries of the Hall of Governmental Affairs had studied the exam paper that scored full marks on policy together. There was no other person in the entire imperial court who could answer so many questions about politics so perfectly, to the point that they felt that they were inferior to him. Without a doubt, 9527 was Li Mu. He scored full marks for policy questions and mathematics. As expected, the officials from the Ministry of Justice had said that the examination paper from Assistant Minister Zhou was not simple. If they were to do this examination paper, they would not be able to get full marks. Full marks for criminal law not only required a thorough understanding of the laws of the Great Zhou, but also a thorough understanding of the laws. Zhou Xiong said, "If that's the case, wouldn't he be the top scholar in both civil and martial subjects?" Wang Shi shook his head and said, "There's nothing strange about this. No one knows his ability better than us. If he were to participate in the imperial examination with these examinees, there would only be one outcome." Zhang Huili said, "He is indeed a talent that His Majesty has set his eyes on. The top scholar in both civil and martial subjects, his future is limitless." At this moment, an official had already brought over a thick booklet. The results of the first imperial examination held by the court were announced today. Until night, the 100 golden names were still shining in the night sky. The name of the top scholar, Li Mu, was the biggest and the brightest. As the top scholar in both civil and military affairs, he was naturally the topic of the people's discussion the most. He beat up playboys and punished young villains. He dared to question the officials of the Ministry of Justice, and also dared to scold all the officials in the court. Those who didn't like him talked about him behind his back. They said that other than his good looks he had no other abilities. They said that he only relied on the support of the Empress. Without the Empress he was nothing. They said that everything he had today was obtained by flattering the Empress. In this imperial examination he once again proved himself to the people of the world. He suppressed the students of the 4 great academies, suppressed the talents of the 36 counties, and became the top scholar in both civil and military affairs. He completely shut the mouths of those people. He let the people of the world see clearly why the Empress only favored him out of all the officials in the court. He could bring peace to the world with his pen and settle the world with his military affairs. This was a true talent. He was worthy of the Empress's special favor. The students of the academies and the future crown prince could only serve as a foil in front of him. Of course, Li Mu becoming the top scholar in both civil and military affairs also proved one thing. The Empress had a unique insight. She had discovered Li Mu's talent from the very beginning. It wasn't as the rumors said, that she was only interested in Li Mu's manliness. After the results of the imperial examination were announced, both the officials and the people couldn't help but praise the Empress in their hearts. The Empress had said before that he would be appointed as the Secretary of the Secretariat. Li Mu was not surprised by this result. After asking for Li Si's opinion, Li Mu asked the Empress to arrange the position of the Minister of God's capital for him. The 3 provinces and 6 ministries were filled with intrigue. It was not suitable for Li Si. Old Jiang had to manage the God's capital office and the imperial clan temple. He could not be at 2 places at once. The positions of Minister of God's capital and Commandant of God's capital happened to be vacant. He could share a lot of the burden with old Jiang. Li Mu did not say anything else. He had no say in these matters. If he said too much, he would be suspected of being a favored official interfering in politics. After becoming the Secretary of the Secretariat, Li Mu was no longer a constable of the God's capital office. Deputy Constable's son got what he wanted. He finally got rid of the word deputy, and successfully received 5 times the salary. Li Mu handed the constable uniform to the government office. The constables there sent Li Mu off. Goodbye, boss. Boss, come back to the government office often. I wish you a meteoric rise in the future. The God's capital office used to be the office with the least sense of existence in the God's capital. As the constables of the God's capital office, the people did not trust them. The constables of the Ministry of Justice looked down on them. Even they themselves were used to it. All this changed after Li Mu came to the God's capital office. The God's capital office was no longer the cowardly office it used to be. They had beaten up the rich and foppish and captured the students of the academy. The people would choose the God's capital office as their first target. The constables of the Ministry of Justice would no longer look at them differently. Some people had been constables their whole lives before they knew what a constable should be like. Li Mu waved at Wang Wu and the others. He walked out of the God's capital office and found that the outside was also crowded with people. Constable Li. Constable Li, stop calling him Constable Li. Now we have to call him Lord Li or Zhuangyun. The people greeted Li Mu. The owner of the noodle stall walked up slowly and asked, Constable Li, are you not going to work in the God's capital office anymore? Li Mu knew what they were worried about. He smiled and said, Don't worry. Even if I'm not here, you can still come to the God's capital office if you need anything. The God's capital magistrate, Lord Zhang Chun, is a good official who loves the people like his own children. The new minister of the God's capital, Lord Li, is my friend. He hates evil and will stand up for you. If you have any problems that the God's capital office can't solve, you can also come to me. When the people heard this, they were obviously relieved. Perhaps, it was because he always wanted to compete with Shangguan Li for favor that he had the nightmare of snuggling in the Empress's arms. Not noticing Li Mu's expression, Zhou Yi flipped her hand and a square piece of spirit jade appeared in her hand. She stretched out her index finger and quickly drew a rune in the void. With a light flick of her finger, the golden rune entered the spirit jade. When Li Mu's drop of essence blood merged with the spirit jade, he vaguely felt that there was a subtle connection between him and the jade. Li Mu was shocked and envious of the Empress's magical ability to draw talismans in the void. The cultivators of the upper realm had too many incredible magical abilities. Zhou Yi took Li Mu's life talisman and said, "If there is an accident, contact me at any time with the spirit snail. No matter what happens, remember to protect yourself first." "Li Mu, I understand." Zhou Yi nodded and said, "Go." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "I will take my leave." After leaving the palace, Li Mu returned home and told Xiao Bai that the two of them were going back to the north region again and would be staying there for 3 months. Xiao Bai heard this and cheered happily. "Then I will go buy some gifts for Sister Lu and Sister Wanwan." Li Mu grabbed her in time and shook his head. "There is no need this time. We still have urgent matters to attend to. Hurry up and pack your things. We will leave now." Sheng Guanli had lost contact and he did not know what happened. Every time he delayed, she would be in more danger. Xiao Bai quickly packed her things and the two of them left the city. They immediately used a high-grade flight talisman and flew into the sky. Yunzhong region was in the east of the north region. Li Mu first sent Xiao Bai to Fulu School. Lu Hanyan happened to be in seclusion with Yu Zhenzi. Only Wanwan was on Baiyin Peak. Li Mu left Xiao Bai on the peak and flew to the east alone. The black-robed man glanced at him and said, "I'll say this first. Whether it's these people or those who come later, I don't want any of their Dharma treasures. However, I want all of their soul energy." Cui Ming didn't think much and nodded. "I promise you." After the two of them reached an agreement, the black-robed man fell silent for a moment and asked again, "You've been hiding in the Great Zhou court for so long. You must know a lot of secrets. About half a year ago, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon died. Do you know what happened?" Cui Ming shook his head and said, "This is a top secret in the imperial court. Other than the officials in the North County, I'm afraid only a few people in the imperial court know about it." "What? Is there a problem with Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's death?" The black-robed man said in a low voice. "His cultivation is slightly higher than mine. He hid in the North County for 5 years to use the 18 Hell Formation and sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people in the county city to reach the 6th realm. Once the 18 Hell Formation is set up, it can trap Dongshen to death. Only transcendence can break it. According to what I know, he clearly set up the 18 Hell Formation that night, but he still failed in the end." Cui Ming looked at the valley below and asked, "How is this formation compared to the 18 Hell Formation?" There was a hint of pride in the black-robed man's voice. He said slowly, "Although I don't have 18 ghost generals under my command, this valley is a wonderful place to gather in. With a little use of the surrounding terrain, I can borrow the power of heaven and earth to set up this formation. Even a 6th realm expert would find it difficult to escape. It's only stronger than the 18 Hell Formation, not weaker." Cui Ming smiled and said, "Then there's no need to worry. If you can refine the souls of these people, I'm sure His Highness Emperor Song will be able to become the head of the 10 kings of hell, right?" The black-robed man didn't speak again, but he snorted coldly in his heart. His cultivation was already at the peak of the spectral soul realm. He wasn't inferior to Chu Jiang of Gojoseon at that time. If the Great Zhou court sent another 6th realm expert, then with the help of that person's soul power and these people in the battlefield, he had a glimmer of hope to take another step forward. At that time he wouldn't even have to bow down to the Nether Saint. When Emperor Song thought of this, he couldn't help but smile. But in the next moment, his eyes moved slightly and he said, "Hide your aura first. Someone is coming." Li Mu held Shangguan Li's life talisman in his hand as he flew all the way here. Dangers lurked everywhere in this desolate mountain forest. Even cultivators couldn't inhale too much of the poisonous fog and miasma in the forest. He didn't know how many poisonous insects and ferocious beasts he encountered along the way. These insects and beasts were nourished by the miasma, so it was very difficult for them to develop basic spiritual intelligence. But their strength couldn't be underestimated. It was impossible to guard against them, and they greatly delayed his search for Shangguan Li. Li Mu flew in the air in the forest. The life talisman in his hand became hotter and hotter. This meant that the distance between him and Shangguan Li was getting closer and closer. When he flew to a certain valley, the life talisman in his hand was already burning hot. This meant that Shangguan Li was near him. In the valley, Shangguan Li looked at Li Mu, who was floating in the air. her expression changed and she warned loudly, "Don't come over." Li Mu heard the voice and flew into the valley. Looking at Shangguanli who was not far ahead, he asked, "What did you just say?" As soon as he finished speaking, he noticed something unusual and looked around. Looking down from the valley, there seemed to be nothing unusual here. But after landing in the valley, Li Mu immediately noticed that something was wrong. There was no trace of heaven and earth spiritual chi here. There seemed to be a large formation around, blocking the heaven and earth spiritual chi outside. Li Mu flew out but encountered an invisible barrier. He was trapped in a formation. Shangguanli covered her face with both hands. After a long time, she asked with a sullen expression, "How did you find this place? Is there anyone else?" Li Mu waved the life talisman in his hand and threw it to Shangguanli. "There's no one else. Sister Mei couldn't contact you. Coincidentally, I went back to the North County for a vacation, so I asked His Majesty for your life talisman and also looked for you. What's with this formation?" Shangguanli's expression turned ugly. "We fell into Cui Ming's trap and are trapped here." She glanced at Li Mu and said, "I didn't expect that I would die with you." Li Mu also glanced at her and shook his head. "You may want to die, but I don't want to die." He took out the spiritual snail and activated it with his mana. He tried to contact the Empress but there was no response. It seemed that this formation was the reason why Shangguanli could not send messages. Shangguanli walked over and said, "We've been attacking this formation for 3 days, but there was no result. This formation can trap a 6th realm cultivator. Cui Ming used this to attract the strong cultivators of the imperial court. I didn't expect that the person who came was you." Her words made Li Mu very uncomfortable. It was as if he was here to die for nothing. It was not like he had never seen a formation that could trap a 6th realm cultivator to death. The last person, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, also set up a similar formation. Grass should have grown on his grave by now. Li Mu might not have the ability to set up such a formation. However, he had never been afraid of anyone who wanted him to destroy it. The formation was not the main point. Li Mu looked at Shangguanli and asked, "Where's Cui Ming?" As Li Mu's voice fell, a burst of laughter suddenly came from outside the formation. Cui Ming floated outside the formation, his face full of surprise. "Li Mu, it's actually you." Li Mu could tell that Cui Ming was very happy. Moreover, it was a joy that came from the bottom of his heart. There was not even a hint of hatred on his face. However, this was precisely the expression of hatred that was the deepest. Li Mu made him lose his reputation and his official position. He made him a 4th-rank official and the son-in-law of a dynasty. In just a few days he became a wanted criminal. He made him work so hard for 20 years, but in a single night he was liberated. If Li Mu were in Cui Ming's shoes, he would also hate him. When hatred reached the extreme, it would also turn into joy. Of course, he was not happy because he was reunited with Li Mu after a long separation. He was happy because Li Mu had fallen into his hands. The black-robed man floated beside Cui Ming and asked, "He's Li Mu, the Li Mu who caused you to end up like this?" The smile on Cui Ming's face gradually disappeared. He looked at Li Mu with endless hatred and said, "When the time comes, don't kill him directly. I want him to suffer all kinds of torture in this world. Only then can I vent the hatred in my heart." He was just a 4th-level cultivator. Emperor Song did not take him seriously at all. He said, "Do as you wish." Cui Ming floated in the air and sneered, "Li Mu, oh Li Mu. You didn't think that you would fall into my hands so soon, did you?" Li Mu looked up at him and said disdainfully, "You're not the son-in-law anymore and you still call yourself, this prince. The princess residence has now taken someone else's surname. There's a new son-in-law who calls himself, this prince. He lives in your house and sleeps with your wife. Fortunately you two don't have children. Otherwise he would beat your children." Cui Ming's face became extremely gloomy. He gritted his teeth and said, "That bastard." Shangguanli asked in a low voice, "Are you telling the truth?" Li Mu said in a low voice, "I'm going to die anyway. Can't I just disgust him a little before I die?" Cui Ming seemed to be really disgusted. His face darkened and he left without saying a word. He did not even mock Li Mu anymore. Shangguanli also did not say anything. She sat on a tree stump and stared blankly ahead. No one knew what she was thinking. Li Mu sat beside her and asked, "Are you afraid of dying?" Shangguanli moved her butt to the side and said indifferently, "What's there to be afraid of dying? I just don't want Her Majesty to be sad." Li Mu tilted his head and looked at her. He found that when she said this, her expression was very calm. It seemed that she really was not afraid. This made him look at Shangguanli in a new light. Chapter 316. Author's note. I didn't expect it to rain at night. I couldn't get a taxi home after dinner and it took too long to walk back, delaying my writing. In the end, I decided to pay a higher price and hailed a Mercedes-Benz. So expensive. If I don't write at least one chapter, I'll feel sorry for myself. I have to write more in the future to earn more money. Before coming to Yunzhong County, Li Mu didn't think that Shangguan Li and the others would be trapped by Cui Ming. With her strength, it was enough to deal with Cui Ming alone, not to mention that she had these internal guard experts by her side. He only wanted to check on her situation on the way back to the North region and then report to the Empress. He didn't expect that with so many people, they would still be defeated by Cui Ming. If they knew the result, the imperial court would definitely send Sixth Realm experts. Shangguan Li looked at Li Mu calmly. The array, he mentioned, had already trapped the 5 of them for 4 whole days. If it were any other time, Shangguan Li would inevitably scold Li Mu. However, at this moment she didn't have the mood to scold Li Mu for his lack of knowledge. She said, attacking this array will backfire. Don't force yourself. Save your mana and try your best to escape later. Li Mu looked at her and asked, are you really willing to die for me? Shangguan Li said calmly, not for you but for Her Majesty. Li Mu waved his hand and said, it's the same. He patted Shangguan Li's shoulder and said, don't worry, you won't die. I promised Her Majesty to bring you back safe and sound. If I go back alone, I won't have the face to see Her Majesty. You're still saying this at a time like this? Ugh. Shangguan Li just opened her mouth when Li Mu covered it. Li Mu raised his head to take a look and said, I happen to know of this formation. Although this formation is powerful, it's not like there's no way to break it. Including you, there are 5 5th-level cultivators here. That's enough. Shangguan Li took away Li Mu's hand and didn't care about his rude behavior just now. She quickly asked, is what you said true? What Li Mu said was naturally true. The Tao of array formations came from ancient inheritances. Apart from the almighty of the Spirit Array sect, who could innovate from time to time, it was impossible for a kid from the Demon sect to create a new array formation. There were only a few powerful formations in the Demon sect. The 10 Ghosts God Trapping Formation, the 18 Prison Formation, and the Immortal Trapping Formation here. The power of this formation was about the same as the Great Formation of the 18 Hells. However, the person who set up this Immortal Trapping Formation knew how to make use of the surrounding terrain to borrow a portion of the power of heaven and earth. This made the power of this formation even more powerful than the Great Formation of the 18 Hells set up by Chu Jiang of Gojoseon.